predominantly based on the suitability analysis that the R1 zone holds more of the suitable more suitable parcels than the other zones do. So,
sorry,
yeah.
we've got a Zoom pop up here. Can we? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. So again, this isn't telling you exactly what to do. This is just giving you an opportunity to understand, okay, if we were going to focus policy change on a particular zoning district within residential zones, where's the biggest bang for your buck, right? Or where could you start to look at options for adjusting zoning? And that, based on this analysis and based on the parcel count that's associated with the suitability analysis, it falls into that R1 zone. So that doesn't mean rezone all of R1 and just make any housing or more dense housing fit into R1 moving forward, but it tries to help kind of figure out where you should focus your efforts. So. Sound good? Okay. Okay, so that was the density analysis. Then we move into the vision. And again, we worked with the project team to come up with the vision and work through some of the options. What you see in kind of the middle of the screen here, the vision statement considerations, these are just some of the things that went into thinking through, okay, how should we structure a vision statement? Because part of the work here within the scope of work for this project was to come up with a housing specific or a housing focused vision statement for the community. So these are some of the things that just kind of went into the initial thinking behind it. And then we leveraged the project team to really kind of vet some of the initial ideas. And this is kind of where we sat. This did change from the PCDC to what you see now. It did read support and sustain the development of diverse housing options for every member of the Lions community, current and future. We broadened that so that we weren't trying to pinpoint, okay, well, if you're not a member, then we shouldn't, we don't want to get into a conversation or a discussion about, or an argument about like a future resident that's not a member now, but could be in the future, where did they fit? That kind of conversation. This is meant to be broad, actionable, kind of, something to the vision for the future. So we switched it to based on the PCDC input to say support and sustain the development of diverse housing options for the Lions community, current and future, that supports attainability and affordability needs. Affordability and attainable are in there because they're two different segments, right? Attainability tends to hit kind of what you think of as workforce. So not your super low income households, but also not your super high income, right? It's your workforce. So that's why those are differentiated there or included in the vision statement. But that's where we landed. Again, we're in the draft plan phase. So if there's still something here that you feel needs a tweak, we can do it. But this is kind of where we landed. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions so far? No? Okay, continue, please.
Okay. Then we get to the goals. And so in the housing futures plan, we've included what we've kind of deemed aspirational goals because there wasn't like a number or a numerical kind of goal associated with it. And these come specifically straight from the comprehensive plan. So again, really wanting to make sure that we make the connection to all of the work that you guys did, last year or whatnot, as you were working toward adopting the current comprehensive plan and how that filters into this housing futures plan. So these are word for word exactly what those goals, those housing related goals are from the comp plan. Then we get into the numerical goals, and these numerical goals, aside from the first one, the Proposition 123 commitment, these come directly out of that community housing profile. Again, we can change the nomenclature, the conversation here to talk about demand versus goal. We could say target. We could, in the plan itself, it talks a little bit about how, this is kind of what you might look toward or try to get to, but it's not an absolute. Again, we don't know what the trend is going to look like in 5 years or 10 years. Things could change. So those 2030 housing goals and the 2050 housing goals, they come out of that community housing profile and the forecasted need. The Proposition 123 commitment was important, and it came up. This wasn't originally included in at least this discussion at the PCDC, and it was in the plan, or it is in the plan, but we also elevated it up with the goals, where the goals are discussed, to make sure that it's noted the community has made the commitment over the next 3 years to produce at least 10 units, 10 affordable units. This is how it kind of relates to the housing goals that have been identified in the plan.
So when we say the next 3 years, when does that clock start ticking?
We signed it. So 24.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then in the plan itself, you'll also see if you've reviewed it or when you review it, we do talk a little bit about what affordability means, right? And I think the thing to remember here is that it really boils down to no more than 30% of gross monthly housing income. When we start to talk about AMI, that's where we can start to push programs or requirements for potential incentives that the community wants to do, or when you start to think about subsidies. And those really fall on the lower end of AMI when you've got maybe a housing authority involved, or you've got vouchers, or you're trying to pay somebody's rent or a portion of somebody's rent or their mortgage. So what we've really tried to do is focus more on the 30% of gross monthly household income as the affordability measure, but still, leveraging or leaning into, how AMI could be utilized as you start to work through how you're going to structure things in the future. So one of those things could be something like a density bonus program. Well, how are you going to measure who gets the density bonus? And one way to do that could be AMI. The other way could be on the folks that could ultimately end up in that housing. So, sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I think I've got 15 minutes left-ish. We'll jump into the recommendations and strategies. These are pretty straightforward, but I do want to plug, these are all options. You don't have to do any of them. You should do at least one because that's kind of your stick as when you signed on to the IHOP funds, is that you have to adopt at least one policy change. The other part of the DOLA IHOP program was that you also needed to identify at least 3 strategies. We've identified 6. So I think you're good there. It's just whatever comes in the next step in terms of a policy change. And one big one that I would plug that I know that you guys have been talking about, and I know that the PCDC has been talking about, is a change to your ADU ordinance, which would check the box, for lack of a better term. But there, just doing the ADUs probably isn't going to get you to your 200 units or whatnot, right? So it's how to pair that with a couple other tweaks to start to move the needle as well. So I just encourage you to think about that, and as you move into the future of considering some of these policy changes. But again, right now, as they sit in the plan, they're all options. They're just our interpretation and our analysis on how they best relate to the community and what we've uncovered in the analysis and kind of the communication and the conversations we've had with the community. So that said, our starting point was the IHOP qualifying strategies list, and these seem to be ever changing as communities throughout the state are implementing new innovative things. A lot of communities are doing the same thing, which is great because it shows you it's a best practice, and they're you can create a situation out of many of these that work in all communities with minor tweaks. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. But this was our starting list here, and I've already plugged David Kimmett once. Our interview with him was really helpful and eye-opening. And I said this during the PCDC. David's a great guy. You guys are probably all very familiar with him. He thinks big, and we didn't walk away from that conversation with many of these things removed. So we had to kind of interpret a few things and try to help prioritize some things that could be acted on sooner rather than later, and then also identify some things that you might need to think through into the future, or that might take a little bit more planning or thought to actually tweak them into something that could support housing development into the future. So you'll see those outlined, but this was our starting point. And these are all up on the website. This presentation isn't clickable, but the link down here, and the link is also included in the Housing Futures Plan itself, that can get you to a wealth of resources that are available here. But what we did is we switched them. We separated them between short-term strategies and general strategies. The short-term ones are the ones that we kind of prioritize based on, again, conversation, the outcomes of the analysis, all that kind of stuff, into things that you could act on sooner rather than later. So you see it's listed as the strategy, and then you've got a justification. So why is it important? Kind of the background detail on what it's intended to do, or what effect it could have to help the situation, and then there's kind of this how. And many of them list steps, many of them list considerations, many of them are pretty straightforward. So you'll see that. But there's 6 strategies. The first 3 or 4, I'll walk you through them, but the short term, the others are the more general, or the more that will take a little bit more thought. But strategy 1 is to promote affordable and flexible housing types. The justification's there, but basically there's 4 steps here, or not even steps. It's really 4 implementation considerations or actions that you could take. So it's allowing middle multifamily housing units as a use by right in single family residential zoning districts. Again, you don't have to allow it everywhere. Maybe use the density map to try to focus some of those areas on where you allow it, or where you make some tweaks to the zoning. Allowing small square footage residential sizes in residential zoning districts, allowing affordable housing as a use by right in residential zoning districts, specifically calling it out. And one of the questions that came up during the PCDC conversation was, how do you do that? Well, you could pair some language in your zoning code or your development review, kind of outline that specifically talks about if you're a developer and you can prove or show that the development that you are planning will fill an affordable need. Maybe there's some sort of extra kind of approval that takes place that allows that or incentivizes that a little bit easier. We've got some language in those case studies and references at the end of the plan that kind of help with that. And then that,
Hey,
yeah.
Derek, sorry. I just want to make sure that we have some time reserved for, in
Sure.
case we want to ask questions, have a discussion. So, this is all really great information. I wonder if we can walk through it a little quicker, just so that we have
Sure.
the time.
Why don't I just do the high level of each one and not get into the details, and I should be done pretty quick.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's strategy 1. Strategy 1 has a bunch of options. Strategy 2 is expedite housing development review. And I think the key thing here is this is a relatively low effort, kind of easy, quick win. And it couples really well with the Prop 123 commitment that you've already made, and a requirement with that. So with that, with committing to Prop 123, you have to codify a expedited housing development review process. So there's many examples. We've included it in the plan. That's one. Strategy 3 is to implement a density bonus program. This one's kind of thick, so you get quite a bit of justification. This is the second piece that still talks about implementing a density bonus program, but the how. And really, the how is to pair it with some sort of affordable program. Like, what are your requirements? What does a developer have to show in order to meet the requirements in order to get a density bonus allowance? Strategy 4 is where you get to the general strategies. So one is strategy 4 is to use vacant publicly owned property for affordable housing development. Talks about the justification. There's a bunch of steps for how to work through that. Obviously, there's some contention in the community about certain areas, but there's also the Dr. Bop areas, and I know Victoria could chime in on that. And we are aware that they're all deed restricted, but there could be a process where we could explore that a little bit further into the future. Again, this is a general strategy, so it's not try to implement it tomorrow, but maybe start to have some conversations with FEMA or whatnot, and maybe speak with some local architects about cost and that kind of stuff. Strategy 5 is to reduce development related fees. Again, the justification, again, the how is there. In some of our early conversations, at least with David and the project team, there's conversations around water rights and fees associated with water, plus, building permits and all that kind of stuff. There's just an area where you could probably try to think through some ways to incentivize housing development around affordable housing and pair it with an affordable housing program where you outline the requirements of that project. And strategy 6 is a new one. This one came out of the PCDC last Monday, just talking about, okay, how could we incentivize the creation of ADUs on previously developed residential parcels? Some of the other strategies really seem more geared toward new development, right? So blank slate, you've got a lot, maybe, it's a dilapidated property or something like that, and you're going to build something new. What if you've already got something there and there's room for density, and you could increase the density through an ADU? So we worked through some options on how you could incentivize the creation of ADUs. There's a whole host of potential opportunities that are included in the Housing Futures Plan now under this strategy that kind of talk about those options. So, and then the last piece I can stop on is really the implementation support for affordable housing in the community related to Prop 123. Yeah, so I can pause there. Any questions,
Great.
comments?
Thank you so much, Derek. I know you can't see the whole room at one time because of our owls, so who's got trustee Eddie?
Can we start with just some process questions?
Yes,
When do we get to speak to Derek again, or is tonight the only night?
I think we can speak to him. We can ask him to have a chat, whenever. I think after what we're going to talk about later is holding public comment, holding public hearings about this.
Okay,
So what do you ask?
well, this is a document that's just it's a non-binding document, right? Is this something we're gonna vote on? Will we vote on this document?
I think we'll be voting to adopt it.
We do vote to adopt it?
Derek, do you know if IHOP requires you to adopt this by resolution?
You do not have to adopt it.
We don't have, we don't.
It's a study.
You could
Okay.
vote to accept it. You could vote to to approve it, but you don't have to adopt it. There's
Okay.
a formal adoption process required for the grant.
If we did vote to adopt it, is it legally binding in any way?
That's a good question for Brandon, because we can't bind the hands of the future board.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, all right.
It's a guiding document similar to me, for me anyway, it's a guiding document, no different than several of the boards and commissions have documents that
Yeah.
guide their decisions. But what our agreement with the state is between conducting this and jumping into Prop 123 are that we're going to adopt one policy, minimum of one policy, and that we will our goal, we need to provide 10 units in the next 3 years of affordable housing. That's it.
Yeah, that is binding though. We need to do that.
Well, no, it's not. If we don't do it, we just are not eligible for any housing dollars in 2027, and then it starts over.
Okay.
That's the Prop 123.
That's the
That's
Prop
the Prop
123.
123. So there's this document and there's Prop 123. They're kind of related, but not entirely the same thing.
Well, they're two different things. This is part of what we need to complete to access the Prop 123 money.
So that we
To
can,
have-
yes, we can access that money.
Right.
We committed to doing this assessment and to building 10 units in the next 3 years is our goal.
Yeah, okay.
But nothing happens to us if that doesn't occur other than you're not eligible for any Proposition 123 money in 2027.
What happens if we build, say, 7 instead of 10?
No,
Okay, so-
you're ineligible for that year.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
But it doesn't mean you can't get back into the good graces.
Yeah, no, you can join. They
Yeah.
want you to jump right back in.
Well, we all do the best we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brandon, there was the question was, is this a legally binding document we have to adopt by resolution? And the answer is no.
No,
It's a guiding document
correct, yeah.
and a requirement to be eligible for state funding.
Yeah, we already opted in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of they're binding in the sense that we are eligible to participate in the program.
Yeah, you did that by resolution.
Yep. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, there's a few things that I found in this that I felt were overall confusing. And then I would really like to go a little bit deeper into what's realistically attainable between now and 2030 versus what's recommended. And we've had this discussion, but I think it's worth maybe having it on the table. So I don't know if you want to talk about some edits, but the very first page, it says Netherlands.
Does
Oh,
it?
that was,
Yeah.
Yeah, you might want to do the old insertion
First
rule.
sentence.
That's really weird because this was a fresh document. I must have been typing when, because I'm doing both of these at the same time.
Okay.
I actually am presenting to the Board of Trustees in Netherlands tomorrow night, so it might have just been in my brain. I apologize.
Okay. I'm trying to find where all my notes went.
here's the forecast.
But, well, there was another section that I actually found extremely confusing. Here it is. When you get to page, well, I have it on 7, but if you go to where it's the percentage of occupied units that are single unit detached, I found these numbers to be rather confusing, and the Lions housing stock is predominantly single unit detached.
Yes.
Okay, so I tried to do the numbers here and I couldn't figure it out, how we ultimately got to your reference in below where you're using 188 rental occupied units and then the 687 remaining owner occupied. But the numbers up above, if Lions is estimated at 721, blah, blah, blah. Anyway,
Okay.
if you could just take a look at it, the way it reads
Sure.
doesn't make sense,
Okay,
at least to me, and maybe that's the case for somebody else, but, or maybe it just requires a little bit more refined tuning
okay.
and
You said that was page
Oh,
7?
I don't see it on 7. Oh, 6, okay.
okay, I could look at the page of your document. It is, where did it go? It's your page 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of this, what is basically your second paragraph.
Yep.
And overall, I'm okay. My only other real concern that came up from audience business in the PCDC was that it, and there was a place in here that it kind of mentions it. It seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the survey of what the community said they were most interested in, the rest of this document is based on the high level, what people said, this is where we ultimately agree upon. And it really doesn't address areas that really are restricted because of topography or contracts or many things that got identified kind of right when we did the affordable housing study before that vote that knocked it down out of Bone Park. And so that was raised as a real concern because that maybe this document sets a false idea of really where we can develop versus reality. And so, because not everybody in the community, I think, understands this place might not really be feasible because of the topography.
Maybe it would be helpful, at some point in the, so we're gonna have a broader discussion about this later on the agenda. But maybe it would be helpful in the future for staff to put together a list of those potential obstacles on specific parcels.
That'd be great.
And so when we look at it, we can kind of get a holistic view of, you know, maybe this does look like a good place for development, but these would be, the challenges to
The current
overcome.
restrictions.
The current restrictions, yeah. And which restrictions are in perpetuity or which can be potentially modified.
I would just like to consider that because if none of us are in this room here in 10 years, but somebody else decides to pull this out and dust it off, thinking about 2040 and 2050, are they going to really understand? Because the history wouldn't necessarily be
Yeah.
there. So I really think it's
Sure.
valuable
That's a
information.
good point.
So I'd like to ask Derek, did you make any adjustments to, I know that you were involved with that meeting. did you decide to add any verbiage that some of these parcels do have current restrictions?
It felt so amorphous that I wasn't exactly sure how to include that because I mean, what are the restrictions? How detailed are the restrictions? Is it one person, one property owner? Is it community based? All that kind of stuff. So I think really here we would need specific feedback from the town staff on, and we can change the map. I mean, if there is absolute, like, this parcel needs to be removed from consideration, or this area needs to be kind of carved out, that's totally doable. And I think it would facilitate that conversation better in the plan to be able to include some of that even high level detail. Because I do, during the PCDC, I do remember there was a property owner that said that they have a letter, some sort of agreement with the town
Yeah.
to not, to not go after, developing a certain piece of the dog park or something like that. But I don't know what that is. So
Well,
I think,
we need to recognize where those exist
right,
in this plan.
sure.
So for every parcel in town?
Well, let's talk about it during the general, that's not what I'm thinking, but let's talk about it during the general
Okay.
business discussion. I want to make sure you have time for your. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, okay, I have about 50 questions, and so I would almost like a workshop, like with the PCDC for a couple hours to talk about this. But Trustee Farrell hit it right on the head. When I was looking at some of these maps, they did clearly state, about public opposition or public support, but they didn't have any of the other aspects of that property on that. I took it with a grain of salt saying, okay, well, it might be on the side of a cliff, but no one's complaining. Fine, it's just a data point. So, but to put together the whole thing that you're talking about is a massive amount of work of all the conservation easements, the utility problems, the irregular land ownership, all the things that we've gone through in the past. But there's one thing that this didn't have that I was really interested in seeing was, we have a lot of HOAs in town. And there is no map. I've never seen a map of a list of all the HOAs and what zones they sit over, or what properties they sit over, and what restrictions do we have because we can't get around that HOA. And I'm going back to your strategy 1 slide where you said, okay, well, make ADUs use by right. I'm like, well, okay, fine, but you're only talking less than 50% of the town. And I don't know, and I know there's a bunch of different HOAs, and I know they all have different rules. It would be really interesting if we could see all the different HOAs and what were the rules and the limitations in each of those HOAs. Because we could be infecting a lot of policy that affects a very small part of the town.
Well, I think that's a really good point, and I don't know, I think what I would like to see is a map of the town that shows the HOAs and what percentage of our housing stock is actually governed by an HOA. That would be interesting to know.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to go into detail about all the rules and regulations, because that would entail an enormous amount of.
Yeah, just a highlight, yeah.
Yeah.
So. Is there any other questions? Because I've got a lot more.
Well, and we're gonna have to wrap
Okay,
this up
we'll
kind of
stop.
soon, so, but I want to make sure, are there any that, Derek can answer quickly,
Or that
maybe?
we could send them?
Yeah, or maybe, yeah, we can also send them along.
No, I'll stop it. I'll stop here.
Okay. We can talk about it during.
Yeah.
a regular
So
meeting.
maybe to look at this a little differently, is there a way, since this was really, this is a high level housing assessment. Is there a way better to specify that those respondents, this is where they felt
Sure.
locations were suitable and not suitable? Doesn't mean they are. It's like you said, it's a data point of someone just saying, I think this parcel could be better utilized for this. Not knowing the restrictions, because every individual parcel, you'd have to do a title search to see if there's a restriction on it.
Yeah.
I know some of the general ones, of course, but most of them are, it's restricted unless you go back to a vote. So that's not impossible. If and when we ever get to a point where the public wants that, then fine. Or some of them are, the town has a first right of purchase. So I wonder if the town buys it and takes that restriction away.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, they're not insurmountable, they're just obstacles. So, you know, I don't know, Derek, if there's a way to just really clearly state
Yeah.
that these data points don't necessarily demonstrate the immediate feasibility of that parcel. It's really just a data point of someone in the public saying, oh, this would be a good spot.
It's public opinion.
It's the wants.
Yeah.
So that we're not, you know, because the likelihood of any one of these parcels being selected in the next 3 years, it's probably gonna be one out of 1,000 parcels, you know? And we would address those if it was, you know, we pursued it, or if we had a proposal on it.
One final comment. So, and that's why I was asking, you know, how binding, or is this
Oh,
something we
yeah.
vote on? Because
No.
it felt like when it came to this aspect, we're
Mhm.
voting on a survey of 75 people.
Yeah,
Of people that,
it is not,
and I'm not gonna vote on that. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just gonna take that as a data point and just
Yeah.
go down my merry way with it. But, I mean, if it was something that became binding, it would have to be much more.
Detailed.
Yes.
sure.
All right, well, Derek, thank you so much. More to come.
Do you want him to be at the end of the meeting today for the discussion, or do you want me to just take notes?
I don't think so. I think we can just,
Okay,
I mean, you know, unless you feel a burning need to watch our whole meeting until your item, which of course you're welcome to.
we are at the end of the grant, and I believe you are out of your hours now.
Yeah, so we're not gonna make you spend more on those. So thank you very much. Appreciate your work, Derek.
Thanks, guys.
Derek, I'll be in touch then.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, all right, so let's move on to the stormwater capital improvement update. I wanna thank staff first of all for turning this around so quickly,
Mhm.
because I know that it was a big lift to look at this.
Well, you're welcome. We were fortunate that we had a cancellation on our workshop, so we could actually put this over here to discuss in a little more detail. So that when we get to general business, hopefully you were able to just, you know, give us some direction. So when we had our last meeting, I believe it was trustee Edding had come up with, is there a way to do some kind of cost benefit analysis on whether or not it's worth investing $3 million on Second and $4 million on Third, compared to the likelihood of that big event happening. And so, Tracy and Aaron and I, who else was involved with that, discussed it. And we realized there has been no private claims from any household on any of those streets, at least in the last 10 years.
So were
With
there,
any rain event.
does that include the flood? That
Yeah.
includes the flood,
Yeah,
okay.
and so basically, that's telling me that, you know, personal homeowners insurance has so far covered the type of damages. The town has not been found liable for anything that's been what's the correct terminology these days, an act of nature or whatever. And so there's really not a ton of public liability to this point regarding those events. The other thing I want to note before Aaron kind of goes through this is that when we design these infrastructure projects, we always want to try to build them to the biggest event possible that we can afford. But even in our flood recovery, we were able to build back to a 100-year event. What we had was a 500-year event. So if we get, when we get the next 500-year event, there's still going to be a lot of damage because everything's built to a 100. So when we're looking at these stormwater projects, these storm events, if you look at our Icon Stormwater Master Plan, they identify 2-year events. Those are the ones we have every July where we have a big hailstorm and, if, you know, a couple really big gully washers. You have 5-year events, and that goes all the way up to 100-year events. So when we've been talking about putting in this big storm water under these different basins, the Second Avenue Basin, the Third Avenue Basin and Steamboat Valley. We've been trying to do that to a 100-year event, which requires major infrastructure improvements underground. Okay? So we took a step back and looked at what about building out to those events that we've all probably lived through here, more in that 5 or 10-year event. And the numbers are astonishingly different to build out to those. So, Aaron, you wanna, Tracy, I don't know who's gonna take it from here.
Aaron will, but I just want to add one thing, these smaller events that we have experienced over the years does eat into our existing infrastructure, such as mostly our roads.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But eventually it could, compromise other, water, sewer, electric as well, because you're eroding away the ground around those infrastructures and stuff. But I think the most prominent thing that you see is the roads are taking the brunt of not having that in place. But
no question about it.
Aaron, take.
But I think the start would be just to make sure everyone does understand, this really isn't looking at flooding from the creeks at all,
No.
right? There's no creek flooding based on, this is on a storm event that really gets stuck, in particular, just over one storm basin. Most of the time, we probably have a couple of them, it might be rare. But in 2015, for anyone who was here, and we had the hail during one of the storms, that really did cause a lot of problems in the Steamboat Valley drainage. Some of that's because of the existing drainage that's there versus hail in the roads, which didn't cause as much on Second and Third. So you can get it to be somewhat isolated based on where that storm sits for a day or longer, something not expected. But then I tried to just go through what we had on a high level from that plan. And as Administrator Simonson pointed out, the study did give us some options because they knew we didn't have money, we didn't have a stormwater utility at the time. And they said, well, here's what we would recommend. If you can do whatever you want, money's not an option. Put in this piping underneath the ground to convey the storm away from under the roads. You don't have to have it just going through the road because you can't convey as much stormwater in a 6-inch curve as you can at 24 or 36. One place has a 72-inch pipe listed. I don't know if we're putting 72-inch 6-foot pipe anywhere, but they went with what would be their recommendation as the engineering firm. And after that, I was the chair of the Utility and Engineering Board at that time. The UEB did review it and looked at it, and both the plan and the UEB did see Steamboat Valley drainage as the biggest concern. It's also the biggest cost. Part of the reason for the big concern there is it runs down in the middle of the two properties, taking in Fifth and Fourth, and it takes much higher up Steamboat Valley. Second and Third are really just coming down from the north on those sides, but when you go further north up the valley, it's actually taking in the whole valley coming down between Fourth and Fifth.
And
We have
elevation,
Old in,
yeah, and velocity.
because it
yeah.
goes all the way up as opposed to just coming off what would be First Avenue. So that's why there was emphasis on Steamboat Valley, trying to do the actual infrastructure work. We had experience there during 2015. Some properties were flooded, were damaged. We saw that that's what goes right through downtown. So if there was an extreme event that wiped out most of a particular block section, you're talking about our main street downtown between Fourth and Fifth. So that has the highest economic impact from damage. We had talked about the possibilities of doing the smaller projects on Second and Third and gone back and forth on, do we need to do the big project or do the smaller one? Tracy did put together in the application for the grant, some of the properties that would be affected. We didn't get actual cost values in there. We could potentially go through property search and try to document all the properties, the values, have someone add it up. Again, we wanted to get this done now. We could do that. I don't know how critical that would be in looking at the overall plan. We do see, just knowing the area where Second and Third come down, you're not going to hit as much economic development area. You're not gonna hit the main street between Fourth and Fifth. Those are gonna come down more residential, but you don't lose your downtown economic driver on Second and Third. So the UEB hasn't had a chance to really review it right now again. I haven't gotten them to come out and say they would definitely go with the lower level curb and gutter. But the icon plan, I tried to put in there, the one high level does document where they felt there is significant value in doing curb and gutter if you didn't have funding to do the full second and third height here.
yeah.
So rolling that into the idea, we're looking at then funding that through sales tax. There is the thought we still have a potentially large catastrophic area with the Steamboat Valley, which is going to take longer to build up too. So you need multiple years to try to get potentially what's needed on Steamboat. And then take the smaller curb and gutter, the work that would help for, they don't give the specific year storm event, but let's say up to the 5-year storm event. Potentially the 10 without getting into too much damage on the property. And we have this desire to get the roads done. So you're getting some stormwater, you're getting the roads that have been a concern done. Without waiting to save up and try to do a huge intensive capital improvement project that, as you said, may not have the cost benefit analysis showing that it's really as critical to do as that Steamboat Valley one.
Thank you. So when is the next UEB meeting?
I think it's Wednesday.
Can we get this on the agenda?
Yeah. And I haven't seen them.
You said yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you get us, it should be. I'm just surprised I haven't seen an agenda go out.
So then as part of our memo, Finance Director Eystone took the number that they had said it would cost back in 2016 to do the two, I'm gonna call it a large project and small project, just to make it easy. If Second Avenue, if we were to do curb, gutter, and does this include streets? No, this is curb and gutter. At that time, they were saying it was approximately $186,000 to do that versus 1.8 million to put the storm pipe under the road as well. She went ahead and took the cost in 2016 and added inflation. And the current number now comes out to 276,000 plus, almost 277 to do that project. And then Third Avenue is now up to 520,000 versus what's probably going to be, at the time was 3 million, is probably now closer to 5. So this would put it a little more in perspective for your discussion on both your sales tax question, or if we want to try to go out for a water power authority bond and do these two smaller projects here and still pursue the large federal brick project that will take massive amounts of, it's going to be very involved. It's going to involve, if we do undergrounding there, it will be significant to many homeowners and businesses and very, very costly. Go for more of a federal grant for that. So Cassie, I don't know if, or if either of you want to talk about how we would funding for these two projects. Here comes Cassie.
Good evening. I apologize. I'm a little stuffy and not feeling the best, but power through. I'm on cold medicine. So I think the Water and Power Authority is willing to meet with us to discuss what our needs are. So I think in order for us to have an effective meeting with them, we just need to understand if, curb and gutter is something that they would be willing to fund. And if it is, then we can get on their list to get started, start the meeting, start all the process, go in front of their board for approval and things like that. Again, the loan would be a low interest loan if we combine the two smaller projects. about 3%. So it's definitely a feasible option, and the interest rate, the annual payments would be $50,000 to $60,000 a year. So definitely leaves funding to address the streets as well. If if the sales tax question didn't pass for some reason, I think it's also potentially a feasible option if the board were interested in increasing the stormwater fee as a backup plan. Because if we double the stormwater fee, that would give us an additional $100,000. But if we, maybe only increased it $5 or $6, that could be the pledge for these smaller projects for curb and gutters. So, that could be a good plan B option.
So that's great. So we're talking about curb and gutter. We also need to talk about streets. And since we're talking about streets, the question that raises to me is, well, if we're gonna be tearing all this up, can we underground the electric up there while we've got the street open?
We hadn't had that.
Which I know, I just thought of it. So,
Well, then it comes in sidewalks. I mean, there's so much.
yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to consider. So I just want to make sure while we're talking about it, we consider everything we can.
Sure.
Real quick, some of it, most of it's in the alleys there going east-west
Uh-huh,
versus there's some north-south,
Okay.
Fourth has lines, but most is in
Okay.
the alley.
okay,
We can certainly, if we decide we want to move forward, keep that in mind for more, grant options. How about streets? Do we have an approximate cost of what the streets would cost for I'm gonna call it upper second and upper third? Because there was a separate project identified below Main Street on Second and Third.
yeah,
So even though I'm not talking like upper, I'm just talking above Main,
north of Maine,
north of Main.
yeah.
A street estimate.
We'll
I'm
think
gonna
north.
try to go through the PCI and then put that up there in a little bit.
But for streets, I think funding options, well, you would have, if your sales tax question would pass, we could do the sales tax question for streets, revenue, and go for the bond if you want to for stormwater. I mean, get them both done if we can't figure out how to do it with our own current budget or reserves.
You could do the streets bond too, but it would take an election question.
Yeah.
As well.
The stormwater will not take an election.
Yeah, if it's an enterprise, no election, non-enterprise election.
Okay,
So like Arvada did a whole bunch of street bonds, which were like voter approved.
okay,
But we could always save up enough of the sales tax should it get approved. Depending on how much the projects cost, and and then do the streets as well. Because it's hard to say when the timing, when the timing of the Water and Power Authority, if it's an eligible project, would be able to come through, because they do anticipate running out of the funding in 2024. So that funding is definitely limited. But it might take us that long to get through the loan application process as well.
okay. Go ahead, Ricky.
Yeah, Cassie, I was actually gonna ask about that exact issue about, the revolving loan running out of money. And I heard a very similar presentation on a very similar project last week. And basically the advice I heard there was, if you want to do this through the Water and Power Authority, you need to get on it ASAP. Because the money is not gonna last, and it's basically first come, first serve.
Okay, so can we identify other sources in case WPA isn't gonna work out?
Sure, I mean, there's always the DOLA Energy Mineral Assistance Fund. We haven't been out there for a little while.
Wasn't there a solar through that though?
Yeah, but it was kind of different, hasn't.
If there's a project, they're not gonna mind that we're doing something else.
Yeah, so I mean,
Chris was like, you got something, let me know.
yeah, I think they're welcoming applications. So again, I think, once we have a number to know what amount we're talking there, it's easier to match that up with something else.
Okay,
But even if we could get, second done. And Tracy, in the meantime, could apply for third.
We're applying for design for Third Avenue right now. Because Brick has a national program, but then there is a state directed funding amount. So they gave them a set aside amount where they direct the state what they can use that for, and it can be for planning and design. So they have a little bit of money there that we could get some of the design done, but it's not a whole lot available, but I was starting an application for design for Third Avenue, for a portion of Third Avenue.
Okay, what about design for second?
The cost on that was,
I can do two separate applications if you guys.
well, but that won't be awarded till 25.
Okay,
I don't think you want to wait that long right now, if not possible. We were talking about the matching or the design cost being 20,000.
For which
so not
one?
much.
For which one? For second or third?
Second.
I'm very confused. I thought we put money aside for the design of Second Avenue and we already went out for bid.
So we did an application with FEMA HMGP for second and third together for design. We didn't get that.
That's when we
So
were.
then they said you can go into the national program, which is very difficult to get, plus 40% of your application scoring is based on low to moderate income. Things that you have to meet, and we're not gonna meet that. So then they said, we do have the state little portion set aside for a state competition. And so
And that would be in the range of these.
that would be more in the range, but I was a little disappointed. They said they had 2 million available when I first talked to them in August, and then I talked to them last week, and they're like, well, of that 2 million, we've already earmarked all of it, and we only have 133,000 available now. So,
Okay, so we could, I think we should apply for the design phase through the state. While we figure out this other financing,
What are the annual revenues of the stormwater fund?
$10 per month for each house.
What are the total revenues?
Yeah. They are about, gosh, probably about 120,000, depending on what the interest income is for the year. The main source is those fees, which is a little over 100,000. We do also, because we set aside that match for those HPMG grants, we have 104,000 that is set aside right now and earmarked.
If I may continue, are we receiving any state grants currently for the stormwater fund?
No,
Okay. What I'm getting at is being careful about limiting our options in our Tabor, because the minute we accept a DOLA grant for 10 grand, you suddenly lost your enterprise status and you can't do bonds.
yeah, we need to be
So-
very, very careful with which source we choose for design if we also want to do construction. But again,
I
if we,
would-
we do have 104,000 set aside in fund balance.
So I think at this point, after staff have been talking about this, we would recommend that both second and third, that you consider building that out just curb gutter street to hold our regular events, maybe up to, like you said, a 5 or 10 event. Second Avenue is the less expensive of the two, of second and third. If the town could pick up, or if we could find without
Sure.
triggering Tabor, doing that design out of our own budget, we could at least get it started while we figure out these other funding sources for second. And in the meantime, have Tracy applying for design and construction of third through the state brick.
we can only do design for the state.
Oh, only,
Yeah,
okay, only design, then you have to go to the other pod.
if you want to do construction, then you go to the national program.
Or depending on if you decide you want to, go out for these bonds, cover both projects.
Well, good thing it's on the agenda later in
I know.
general business. I think we're gonna have a lot to talk
That's why
about.
we wanted to kind of answer some of the
Yeah.
complicated stuff now if we could.
Go ahead, Greg.
What was your recommendation for fifth? You said.
Fifth
second,
would
third?
then be starting to pursue a large HMGP federal grant.
Alright.
That one has significant impact, significant cost, and probably is gonna take several more years to design and construct, including, I mean, it could be something as big as, instead of, it would have to be studied.
That's what I was gonna say.
Instead of ripping out everything that's currently there, is there a way to build is it retention or detention pond at the top of the hill, just to slow the water into our system? Would that
Yeah.
be cheaper than ripping out everything between Third and?
I can't even imagine.
I know.
What that would.
98 study really focused on a pond up there.
Up at the
above
top.
What
Eagle
study did?
Valley. A 1998 stormwater or drainage. The new Icon one says they don't agree with that and they recommend away from it, but
So
that's two studies. It's
two different studies and
So
then,
let's get a third break. this.
well, and there are arguments right now for land acquisition
yeah, I was gonna.
for certain types of hazard mitigation projects. So, again, it's bandwidth and time and all those things, but we think fifth is gonna be a much bigger, longer project.
Yeah.
So maybe we work on a federal on the side on that and try to get second and third to meet, our community's, regular needs.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for all the work on this, everybody, in such a short period of time. It's really appreciated.
Feel better, Cassie?
Feel better, Cassie, and thank you to trustee Edding for asking the best question of the year.
Just to confuse us more.
So we'll, if nobody has anything else, we'll take a break and reconvene at 7 for a meeting.
Thank you.
Sound good? Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's so nice to see folks in the audience tonight. Thank you for coming. I will call the December 18th, 2023 Lions Board of Trustees meeting to order. Can we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Rogan.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell.
Present.
Trustee Elson.
President.
Trustee Dottie.
Present.
Trustee Edding.
Present.
Trustee Delman.
Present.
And Trustee Williams.
Thank you. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We must acknowledge with respect as non-native people that the land on which we stand, live, and learn. It is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? So moved. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for the vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Take a reflective moment of silence in the busy holiday season. Thank you, everybody. So now is the time for our audience business. I'm glad to see we've got people in the audience. Hopefully they have some business. If you do, just come on and approach the podium. You'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. And just so you know, the Board of Trustees doesn't respond to audience business, but we can respond either during the agenda item if it's in regards to an agenda item or in our trustee reports. So I see there's some folks online, but let's take folks in the room first. Anybody like to address the board? Great.
Melody Fairchild, 403 Second Avenue, Lyons. I just would like to express my support for the orchard. I was not a resident of Lyons prior to the flood, but I understand from speaking to people who were here and have served on boards and been a part of the rebuilding after the flood that a community garden and community orchard were part and have been part of the rebuilding effort to connect and reconnect to the soul of Lyons as it was before the devastating flood. And I feel that the property at 124 4th Street, did I get that address right? Is a really ideal place to have an orchard. There's a tremendous potential as a mother of a elementary school kid in town and connected to the youth in town for this orchard to be a learning laboratory for the kids, both at the elementary school and the middle and high schools, to engage with our ecosystem in a real-time, non-virtual reality environment, connect to our local history and the abundance of this valley that we live in. And I'd really love to see this go forward.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Megan Graham. I live at 211 Wilkes Drive. And I would like to echo everything that Melody said. I just want to express my support for the orchard. In addition to what she said, I think it's really pretty special and exciting that a community member who happens to be a trustee as well, but that he's taken on the effort of the orchard. I think that just goes perfectly with Lyons community spirit. So I think it's a wonderful idea. I think it'll add a lot of value to our town, and we've got someone who's willing to take the helm and make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room?
My name's Adrian Kirk, I live at 1049 Fifth Ave. I'm the executive director of Lions Community Farm Project, and I'm here to support, when all I can, small nonprofit that we did, receive considerable grants, biggest amount so far for the next year, so we definitely want to support any way we can. This is what we're about, growing food locally.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tyler Steller, and I live at 241 Evans Street down the street. I'm the treasurer with Lions Community Farm Project, as well as founder of Simply Be Conservation. And so I love these projects with the community where we can have these living classrooms, as well as these grounds to engage our community together in person, as well as getting back to nature, which I think is so important for the health and vitality of our community. As well as I also have had some grants through my Bee Foundation, so we can put some pollinator flowers around the orchard, make it look really beautiful, stunning, again, with educational components, all the signs. I fully support this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm Sue Willie. I'm at 211 Second Avenue. I'm one of Glenn's neighbors. And I know he's put a lot of thought into this. We've talked about it several times together. And I work with the Botanic Garden. I volunteer down there, and I volunteer on the weed posse and do different things around town. And I just think this would be a lovely addition to that little corner of our world there. When I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, years and years ago, we had a really nice orchard out in a little town called Dexter. And we had so much fun at cider presses, and the children just really enjoyed it. It was a great family thing. And so I think this would be a great addition to our little town. So I'm just here to support that.
Thank you so much. Okay, and then do we have anybody else in the room that I missed? Dakota, do you want to say it now? Okay, next time maybe, huh? Yeah. All right, anybody online wish to address the board?
I wonder if that's what they did. We can tell them to unmute or raise their hand.
You can either unmute or raise your hand if you would like to, just don't want to miss anyone. Okay, well, then I'll close audience business. Thank you very much, everybody. And we'll move on to staff reports. Boulder County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Sears, good evening.
Good evening. Trying to make this short, quite a bit of stuff to talk about, but first off, just want to give thoughts and condolences to Lions Fire. They lost one of their longtime members and also a member of the town for quite some time. So we've gone through a lot the last few years.
Yeah.
And then co-responder updates. So I had a good conversation with Janine Hall, who's the supervisor for the co-responders. Learned a lot from it. Essentially, Lynette was moved up to Netherlands because Netherlands got what's called a DOLA grant, which is only funded through November of next year. So if they don't, Netherlands doesn't pay her position or they get another grant, then they won't have funding for her up there anymore. So currently we only have one co-responder for all of unincorporated Boulder County. So she's working on a proposal for the commissioners and the sheriff's office to try to fund a rural position. So basically Netherlands and Lions. So kind of like a rotating spot, halftime here, halftime Netherlands. In the future. So that's still in the works. And I guess the commissioners have cut funding for mental or public health. There's a new tax
Mental health.
for being proposed next year. But so they're still working on it. They're always looking for grants. They're mostly just grant funded. And I can talk offline with Victoria, but they're willing to help some costs if they can to fund a full-time position up here if the town it has the funds to pay for that position. So, and she's willing to talk to anybody about this and come to a board meeting or whatnot. So That's right for that. Just the dogs are still seen off leash on the town property off Third and Park, the horseshoes, that's probably the same people, but, I let our animal control and deputies know, so dogs are off leash, you're gonna get a ticket. So we have a gentleman in town that's, trying to see if Lions is a good fit for him. We contacted him a couple times. He's currently homeless. We've offered services for him, taking him to Boulder Longmont. He doesn't want to go there because there's too many people there. So if you see him out and about, he's mid-40s, early 40s. He was nice to our deputies. He's just wants to try and make Lions his new home. So if you see him out and about, please call us if he's doing anything wrong, but he's just trying to see if Lions is a good fit for him. So we're trying to work with resources to see what we can do for him. But so he's been warned about camping in town, and he seems to not worry about that too much. So, and then stats, calls are about up just over 300, which is mostly because everything we talked about, traffic and extra patrols are up. Calls are actually down just under 40 this month so far. And that's because of traffic. We haven't had a lot of people working the extra duty traffic this month. Cars coming in town, our average are about 6,000 per weekend the last few weekends. Play hits are down, only 8 the first 2 weeks of December, so that's good. Working on a proposal to possibly get a few more cameras, so total of 6. It's still in the works, but that way we'd have every entrance and exit from town covered, so that would be super helpful for us. And then I added accidents into the stats. We so far had 27 this year in town. At least 2 of those were DUIs. I'm still working on trying to go through all the cases, but I went through about half of them, and most contributing factor is just careless driving, not paying attention, types of things. So haven't seen anything regarding speeding or like speed or certain areas that are problems. So I'll continue to go through those, and then just working on end of the year stats that I'll get done and present to you guys next year. And then just tickets are down this month, just 49, and that's because of traffic. So, but they're up 164 from last year.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Sergeant Sears? Go ahead, Trustee Darcy.
I have a couple of questions. One is pertaining to the traffic stops. So I appreciate you giving us the comparison between last year and this year. And so I was surprised to see that there were 69 traffic stops last year during the December 1st through 13th time period, resulting in 44 speeding tickets, mostly between 10 and 19 miles per hour over the speed limit. As opposed to this year, there were only 17 traffic stops, resulting in 10 speeding tickets. Can you tell us why that is? Is there like less patrolling happening, less ticketing? Are people just going slower? What do you think?
It's extra duty, so traffic enforcement, and it's who signs up. Right now, Netherlands actually paying double time because they're trying to see if it's worth them paying for is traffic enforcement, because they haven't had any over the last year or so. We're now able, since we kind of took over the contract, to write their tickets. So that's a big factor, is mostly just people signing up for extra duty. And what else? There's a lot of other events going on that people are signing up for. And people aren't working extra duty like they were last year.
Okay, so what you're saying then is that there are just less police officers out there to patrol the highway or to stop.
Yeah, so my expectations for deputies that work in town are, yes, enforce traffic, but more of a community policing outreach to the community, foot patrols. That's why foot patrols and extra patrols in areas like the parks, which is why most of the call load is up from this time last year. Is there's almost maybe 200 more extra patrols than there were last year. So that was kind of my expectations. And traffic's important. They do traffic, but we're short staffed and day shift is busy with calls, and our assigned deputy up here is covering essentially 2 districts a lot. So a lot of stuff in Longmont they're having to cover just because of staffing, which is looking out for us. We got a lot of people in FTO and coming through the process, so hopefully by this time next year, we'll be close to fully staffed if we don't lose anyone else. So.
And how do you determine which areas to focus on? Like, I'm just thinking about an audio, you know, a resident who came in during general audience a while back, specifically concerned about Highway 7 and that crosswalk. And I wasn't sure if that was an area that you were focusing on, or if you just rotate randomly.
It's kind of just up to the deputy, or if we have if we get a complaint like that lady that came in, you know, I'll send out a message to the deputies that work up there and say, hey, can you focus some extra patrols in this area? Or if we get a lot of accidents in one particular area, but it's pretty much when they sign up for extra duty, they go to whatever spot they feel like they do.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And also I have another question, regarding the homeless person. I'm really thankful that you were able to connect with him this weekend. I've seen him around a couple of times outside the market in the morning, trying to eat something warm to warm up because he's been camping outside. And at first, I guess I'm a little ignorant around the Alliance Municipal Code regarding camping. I don't know if we call this unauthorized camping or unregulated camping. I'm not sure if we have a code for that or not, whether that's allowed or not within town limits.
So basically, any town-owned properties falls under parks and open space. So under that ordinance, there is a no camping without permit, along with, 10 other, important rules like no fires and stuff like that. So, I was actually just talking with Brandon about that. So if he is sleeping on the sidewalk in front of a business at 3 a.m, we contact him. I just don't know yet if that falls under parks and open space. I feel like it doesn't. And, as long as he hasn't been like trespassed from the business, or he's not impeding the walkway, or, causing a disturbance or making people feel unsafe because of their actions, and there's not a whole lot right now we can do about it. We're still looking into it. But I can tell you, this individual, is passing through. Hopefully he's, actually last week, I think on his way into town, and one of our night shift deputies saw him walking on Highway 36 and stopped to ask him if he was all right, if he could give him a ride somewhere. He's like, no, just coming down from Netherlands. I didn't like it up there. I'm gonna try the lines. So, we talked about, panhandling and just trying to, he called it working. He's trying to get a job at Circle K apparently. So we're trying to help him. We haven't had any calls today or yesterday on him. So he's been warned about, the camping ordinance, and he seemed to not really said it's not a crime to be homeless. So hopefully we don't want to ticket him. We just want to get him help, because luckily it hasn't been too pulled out, but it's going to start getting really cold.
Well, and I guess that was my larger question here, was what is our policy? I know that we don't have a huge history with homeless people, fortunately, but I wonder what our policy is. What are we supposed to do when we encounter somebody who's homeless in the streets, and he was panhandling outside the market?
We do have policy, we do have ordinances about panhandling and obstructing a highway or a walkway. So we do have the ability, if that is a problem, to follow up on that. What we tell folks when we have someone experiencing homelessness is that the town of Lyons does not have the services that they need. We just don't have them to offer. We fall under Boulder County Public Health and Human Services. And so we would encourage them, we usually call the sheriff just to confirm that, if they're having any mental health issues, or if they are in safety, concerns, because Boulder and Longmont both have shelters. And someone like this who wants to be here and work here, they can get a Z-Trip voucher from there to come here every day if they want to work. But we just don't have services to put people up overnight. And Leaf has informed us that that's not a service they provide. So we contact the sheriff, they do a basic assessment of mental health and physical well-being, and we go from there. But it is every person's right. Some people choose to not be somewhere, so. But it can't be impeding, it can't be trespassing or.
Yeah, the two code provisions I would look to, and not saying this is the first option, but could it potentially be a violation would be obstructing a sidewalk. Or trespass, and both trespassing is private property, if you're on private property, or if in case of right of way, if it were to disperse from, and they're obstructing, then that is also a violation of this full code. So those are the two, I think we're gonna have more discussions on potential options, but
Okay, good.
those are the two we look at.
We also, the mayor and I reached out to Leaf to say, can we meet and have a plan here? Because, we've had, oh gosh, probably 4 or 5 people this year that have just kind of shown up at town hall and want to know what we can do. And we just are not, we don't have a human services arm. So we have been very, I think, very responsive. And in the summer, when it is camping season, if there's an open spot, they certainly can do that, but that's in a camping ground. But in the winter, we don't allow camping unless you're in an RV because of safety reasons. We don't, right? So in this case, if he chooses to be, and he's not violating anybody's regulations, he can do so, but Boulder and Longmont are set up to do the sheltering.
And that's what I told him as well. And thank you so much for following up with Leaf. I really appreciate that as our human resource or human services agency. Sergeant Sears, just one last question for you. As much as I am worried about his welfare, I'm also worried about the safety of this community. Is there any reason for us to be concerned?
No. So I've checked his criminal history. He doesn't have anything significant that, is violent. He's not a violent offender, so. He was very nice to our deputy. He's got some mental health issues, but nothing that we can do anything about at this time. He refused co-responders. He basically just wanted to be left alone, and I would say most of his adult life, he's been homeless, and I think he's the type that is choosing to be that way.
Yeah.
And he didn't like Longmont or Boulder because he said there was just too many people, so.
So yeah, the last person we had, when was that, a month ago? She said she had been homeless for 40 years. That is her choice, and she walks around and gets rides, and she's trying to find where she fits. And she was experiencing mental health issues as well, but did not want assistance. And forgot where I was going with that one. She it was very clear. She just needed some food and, wanted to go on her way till she found her place. But she was also, anxiety. I think anxiety is a big issue with a lot of people we meet here at town hall anyway, that they don't like the big cities and they're looking for a smaller place, more private and quiet to find a place to settle.
That's pretty much what he said to me. And I have to say this community is very generous. Practically every single person leaving the market was giving him some food. So he's not going hungry, that's for sure. It's probably cold out there at night, I can imagine. And I see a mental health therapist here in the room who works at Leaf, and I'd like to think that he was connected with those resources as well.
He said he had talked to Leaf. He said Leaf, and I don't know how true this is, but he said Leaf was gonna give him a tent and let him camp in the park. I don't think it's very true, but, yeah, like, what Victoria's saying, he's just seeing if this is a right place for him, and, I think he'll find that, it's not a good place to panhandle, because it's just not a lot of good places like there are in the bigger towns, and there's just not a lot of services for him here, so. Everything I can tell, he's been, at least in Colorado, since August, but every year or so, he's been in a different state, so. I think he's just trying to find where home is, so. And as long as he's not doing anything, and he's, we're not getting calls about him, and, if he's not breaking, the law, or, people aren't calling because he's acting, running around and screaming and yelling, then, we're gonna give him a space, but if there is a crime, we'll go contact him, but we're not just gonna keep, going up to him and kind of harassing him, because it's not right, so.
Well, thank you for putting him in touch with some resources and keeping an eye on him. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sergeant Sears? I have a recommendation. Sunday evening, I heard there might be a guy in a red suit with a beard and a red hat flying through town. And so I would just like to encourage you to give him a pass if he's speeding.
It's out on the road.
Is that
He's an airspeed.
Yeah, he's airspeed. He's off the ground.
Airspeed, yeah,
He's on the ground.
Stay away from that golden eagle nest.
yeah, yeah, maybe you could give him an escort. if he gets lost.
I'll let his significant other know that.
Thank you, Sergeant
Yes.
Sears. Appreciate it. Okay, so we have no ordinances and public hearings tonight.
Do you want an admin or?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, admin.
It's okay if you don't.
No, I do.
You all have
I
my
do, I
written
do.
report.
I
But,
do.
couple of highlights this, couple of weeks. Summit Housing, now all of the houses and townhomes have their certificate of occupancy.
Oh, great news.
Summit Housing and Highland Property Management are putting significant resources into reviewing applications. My understanding is that, sounds like we're gonna have somewhere around 15 people moving in the next few weeks, so that is going to be a big change there, and then, but we only get through December for this local preference we have. And so, after that, they will accept applications from anywhere. Well, they're accepting them now, but we still have a local preference through this month. So it is really important that anyone we know that meets the eligibility and income guidelines applies now. Okay, so pass that along. As you guys all know, the demolition of 402 Main was delayed due to some water and sewer issues. Are they still on target to come tomorrow and start putting up fencing?
Haven't heard for sure. I know they did get the sewer cut and capped in the water part, so they're ready to go.
So you might see some mobilization between now and the end of the month, but they're not going to start actual demolition until the week of January 2nd, just because of the holidays and crews and things. Our co-compliance officer that you met 2 weeks ago, got right on the stick there. He has had very successful interactions with our residents and really good compliance in regard to inoperable vehicles and snow removal. And then he did hand out personally 120 letters to our local businesses, reminding them that it is the month to renew your business license. So he did that personally, and we saw an immediate response to that. So those are all good things. We're looking forward to his being here and helping us work through some issues that have been neglected recently. You guys might not recall this, but you approved the staff to apply for what was called Safe Streets for All. It was a federal grant. It was to look at safety along our main highway corridors. And we were selected. It was $120,000 grant. This will take a look at how to improve pedestrian and bike and traffic mobility along 36 basically in town. So it'll be interesting. This is just the study, of course, but this is pretty exciting. So we have a new project we'll be working on. And then I had a whole list of public works updates. Our salt sand building is done, so it is now full and ready for the next events to happen, but that did get erected in this time. Broadway electrical undergrounding is complete up till the next phase where Moss Rock makes their decision if they're going to underground along the 300 to 400.
You might say the conduit.
The conduit, I'm sorry, the conduit's in, the wire's not.
How are you dealing with the CenturyLink?
They're fine. They're out
Okay,
working on what they need to do.
okay, let me know if that changes.
And then we know there was some confusion about the Broadway project, but hopefully you can start seeing it now. They're almost done on the south side. And now it will shift to the north side. And so the north will go back north another 8 feet.
Yeah, I still hesitate. I thought we were talking inches before, but I know you guys have said feet.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like it's with the curve. But
So you'll start seeing the work on that site next. And then hoping to have our sidewalk assessment presented to you guys in January. And we were planning to set up the ice rink this week. And now the temps are way too warm. So we don't want to put the water in and then have people in there breaking up that line there or having a windstorm and fill it with dirt and crud. So we're gonna hold off one more week and fill it hopefully next week. But we are, as soon as the weather decides it's going to be winter, we will do that. And we have had 2 birds so far showing the symptoms of avian flu. So it is expected to be back this year at a much lower level. But we have 3 staff trained on how to dispose of those as that occurs. And the reporting to CPW this year is not going to be monthly. They just said end of season. So we will be putting up some of those signs though. So if you see them, don't be shocked not to touch sick or deceased birds. Okay, call town hall if you see one. We'll send somebody on. Any other questions? Questions for Administrator Simonson? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, legal update.
Just a few quick ones for me. First, we talked about this, I think, last year, but it's coming back around. The Office of Information Technology is doing a rulemaking right now on accessibility for local governments. It's pretty far ranging. Implications not just like for our streaming, but for the documents we have existing. We are following that for CCUA, the Color Communication Utility Alliance. CML is also doing, this great work on that. But I will keep you updated on that, as it might have some policy changes we're going to have to make to comply with that if it does get finalized.
And website, we have some changes.
Big website changes. But not just, it's everything. It's literally documents you have that may be 100 years old, which is insane, but that's what we're going right now. Just want to keep you abreast and we maybe bring in some recommendations forward based on the outcome of that.
Can you bring money with it?
I wish, that's been about a big
That's
part of our,
yeah.
that's been a big part of our argument. This is an unfunded mandate and they don't realize the cost and extent for people like Lions, they don't have Denver resources, whole departments dedicated to this. And I know that because I worked on these issues for Denver. And that has not won the day so far, but.
So, from compliance wise for this, at the administrative level, Kim will be working on websites in the clerk's office and mine. Physically, Doug Mattingly, the co-compliance, has agreed to be our ADA coordinator for this.
Oh, great.
For things that are,
Web-based.
no, not
Physical,
web-based,
physical.
physical.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to get him whatever training and he'll be the one to watch over that for us and our businesses. Just so you guys know.
So that's that one. The next thing I want to let you know is that I've been traveling a lot recently, traveling to our clients and going through many, many different small towns all over the state, it seems like. And you guys probably, I can't say you have the best, but you have really, really good Christmas lights. All over town, very impressive.
Why can't you say we have?
I know. Scale of 1 to 10. Thank you. That works for me.
I want to know whose are better.
Others are very symmetrical.
And we like photos.
Photos improved.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the trunks of the trees all being decorated. You see a lot of the street lights and different, and a lot of them are the same. Some are really good. But a lot of them are exactly the same model, basically.
We'll make you a judge next year.
Yeah.
You can come to the tree light next.
Well, if I don't have COVID, then, I will. And then the last one is another reminder, we also talked about this, but as of on January 1st, we'll no longer be Kissinger and Bellman. only part of Williams, Wilson, Delman and Dittman. I'll keep remembering that acronym. So just the change of the name, everything else is pretty much the same. You will see a new representation agreement for approval on next agenda, but just the change of the name, the new emails. So I'll send out my email to everybody as well. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. Questions for Attorney Dittman about why we're not the best at lights?
Like a full report,
It's like-
please, with photos.
It's like saying you're your favorite child, right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. No, seriously, no question, any questions for Attorney Dittman?
No.
No. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for visiting us in person.
Of course, I'm always happy to do it.
Okay, so now we can move on to consent agenda. Clerk Vasquez, will you please read consent into the record?
Yes, item one is resolution 2023-80, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, providing for additional appropriation during fiscal year 2023 for unanticipated 2023 revenues and expenditures required of the town of Lyons, Colorado. Item two is resolution 2023-81, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, accepting an engagement letter from the Adams Group for 2023 audit services. Item three is resolution 2023-82, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving an agreement for animal services between the town of Lyons and the Longmont Humane Society, Inc. for 2024. Item four is resolution 2023-83, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending the 2017 Land Use and Management Plan for deed restricted buyout properties, Dr. Bob, to accommodate an orchard at 124 4th Avenue. Item five are the December 4th, 2023 regular Board of Trustees meeting minutes. And item six are the December accounts payable.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
Anything anyone would like to pull?
Yes, I'd like to pull resolution 2023-82, a resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, approving an agreement for animal services between the town of Lyons and Longmont Humane Society for 2024.
Thank you. Anybody else?
That was the one.
And I would like to call item four. Resolution 2022-83 for discussion. Okay, then let's vote on consent as amended.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Everybody? All right, we have a representative from the Humane Society here. Would you like to state why you pulled? item
Yes,
three?
yes, and I'm so glad you came because I do have a few questions, as I'm sure I'm not the only one. So basically, as I was reading through the packet this weekend, I was very surprised. I had some idea, actually, maybe I had no idea, that the town contracted with the Longmont Humane Society to recover stray and stranded animals from Lyons and deliver to them to the Longmont Humane Society. I guess what was shocking, and that's fine. What was shocking to me was that the fee went from just under $5,000 in 2020 to over $10,000 for 2024. So in 4 years, that amount has doubled. So I guess I have a couple of questions.
Well, and I think we were anticipating this might get pulled, and so Administrator Simonson has a staff report. Would you like to hear that report and then maybe see if it answers some of your questions?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You want me to?
Yep.
Okay. So, just a little history on this. The town of Lyons used to have a contract. Well, let me even back up. Boulder County is animal control services for the town. When an animal is picked up by animal control, if the owner is not easily identified, they take them to the Humane Society. And apparently they have a contract as well to provide for those animals. Usually if it's someone who has to go pick up their animal, the owner has to pay for that fee. But if it's a stray or a surrender that can't be afforded, it's picked up by the county. So at one point, the town of Lyons had a pretty bad issue with this prior to code of compliance. And the amount we were being charged per animal was
getting so high. And so we went to a monthly contract amount with them, or an annual contract amount with the Humane Society. And when this contract came in for renewal, and Russell and I have talked about this, when this came in for renewal, we were surprised by the amount, but so I said, can I see the detail of where these animals are coming from? And I was quite shocked to find out that of the 20, how many animals, 22 or animals or something surrendered this whole year, only 4 were from in town. The rest are all from 80540 in the county. And so I think we have a little disconnect. And so I would actually ask if the board so sees fit, I'd like to table this item. I really want to talk to Boulder County and with the Humane Society to see if we can figure out a better tracking system so that not all 80540 is charged to us. Most of the animals, the far majority, were from unincorporated up in the mountain areas, Pinewood and Riverside Raymond and Owens Park. They aren't even ours. They're just brought here. And so they get logged in as 80540. And to me, as a Boulder County taxpayer, we're paying for animal control and for that contract through Boulder County. I don't think the taxpayers of Lyons should be paying for animals from outside of town.
I don't think anybody would disagree with you.
So it really was something that after we got the contract and we started digging into it, we made that realization. But I do think Russell would like to explain why prices are going up.
Yeah.
And then we need to talk about, do we want to stick on an annual fee or do we want to go to a per animal, since the number from in Lyons is really very low. And I think most of our folks can probably pay that surrender fee.
Okay. Well, Russell, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role at the Humane Society and
Certainly.
the costs?
My name is Russell Hinkle. I've been with the Humane Society for 7.5 years. This is my first year in the CEO role. And when I took over, I'll just tell you the big picture, non-Lion specific. When I took over, like last year, we were like $700,000 in the hole. The year before it was something pretty bad, and we're just on a trajectory to not be able to sustain the business. And so we were doing a bunch of analyses, and the majority of the contracts we have had with local jurisdictions, of which Lyons is one, Frederick, Firestone, Tacoma, Meade, Boulder County. The cost that we incur on average to care for an animal this year is hovering close to $600. Last year was $540 per animal. And that's just average out. It's all the costs divided by all the animals. And so we were looking at some of the contracts we were getting, something like 10 cents on the dollar for the services that we were providing from municipalities. And so we took on the challenging uphill with going and talking to everybody to say, hey, we need to do a pretty stark adjustment to get somewhere reasonable. And so the projection for the $10,000 was assuming the numbers, we're thinking it might not be right, but say what the numbers were right and we were getting 22 animals per year. And our cost was $600. We were passing about 70% of that along in the contract offerings this year. That was kind of the rate we used to bring equity to everybody, and that's kind of the math we use. So the costs have gone up. The minimum wage has affected us pretty heavily, as you can imagine. I don't know, inflation, dog food costs. You don't have to go into detail there. And then all of our contracts haven't really gone up. So it seems like each year we should be correcting the contracts just to be like appropriate. That hadn't really happened in a while. And so we were just trying to correct that imbalance while we still had time to maneuver, So we're trying to get to where we can cover a lot more of our costs. And we run a really efficient business. The CEO before me, I don't know if you ever met Liz Smokowski was a Six Sigma person, and we had a lot of really efficient lean business practices, and we still do. And it just costs a lot of money to care for the dogs with the quality that we do. We provide elite level quality care for our dogs, and I have a 98% live release rate. We kind of joke sometimes we give the most proper amount of stimulation and things that animals need while they're visiting us. They probably get a little bit more than they get sometimes even in home unless they're adopted. So we a lot of that. I mean, I'm really honored to be in this position. And I assume most people in this town are pretty animal friendly as well. So that's the gist of it. But she just told me today that the number, the amount of animals coming from lions is a question. So we don't intend on charging you for animals that aren't from the lions. And so that's what we'll figure out. And that shouldn't take too long to figure out, because we can go through, if the number is 22 animals near the sport, I can go through and manually audit every one of those as well. And we can verify the records and see where they're coming from. And if we're getting an additional 18 animals from neighboring areas and they're making their way along, and they're not really covered under a contract, then I guess we'll have to kind of expand on that.
Well, they're all Boulder, I mean, that's all Boulder County. So if you have a contract with Boulder County, I would think it's them. But I think our clerk's office can sit down with you if you want us to look at like the last 3 years or something and see what the actual Lions numbers were. If you can provide that individual data. It's really coming up with a way at intake for someone not to say, I'm from Lions, 8054, because that's what's happening. And as we know, there's probably more people outside of Lions, we know that, than inside.
The good news from your perspective is I think it's more straightforward with Lions. And within Longmont, the pockets of Boulder County, and in East Longmont, the pockets of Weld County and Boulder County, or in towns like Firestone, we have this very long, hard, ongoing task of determining which side of the road, which side of the intersection that dog was from. Was that Weld County? Was that Firestone? Was that Boulder? Was that Longmont? So yeah, I think yours is at least just like probably more straightforward at the end of it. So
And it's a much lower number to go through.
So we should be able to figure that out pretty quickly without a whole lot of effort.
Thank you.
And just in the big picture, we use the averages because we have enough animals that doing per animal contracts with everybody would be a beastly administrative burden for us. So we have to hire a bunch of staff. So it's a big enough set of numbers that usually the averages are pretty right. We've calculated a few different contracts in different ways and come up with very similar numbers. So that's why we use that methodology. And then if we did per animal, we get 2,000 animals from Longmont every year. We can do that per animal without increasing our own costs by significant amounts of money. That's the method that we use just because it makes the most sense. As long as the intake numbers are accurate, which in this case.
So yeah,
we'll check that.
we can be in touch after the meeting if the
Thank
board
you.
is okay with tabling this.
Well, I want to see if trustee Dashy's questions got answered before I entertain a motion to table.
Yeah, I think I understand better now that animal control with Boulder County is one contract, and then the Longmont Humane Society piece is another contract. So realizing there's those two pieces to that. And also realizing how many animals I guess I would have been curious to know what we were charged per animal in the past, but I guess that no longer is relevant now. I'm just surprised.
It was like 400.
Up until this current contract.
That was years
like
ago.
400
That was at
a
least
month.
5 years.
And now it would be 600 per animal, basically.
Or 70% of it roughly. Our cost is gonna be about $600 per animal.
So, yeah, I think it's good to take into consideration small towns compared to larger towns. Like if you're saying there's 2,000 animals coming from Longmont, there's only, I don't know, maybe 4 coming from Lions. I mean, there's a huge difference there. I don't know. I would appreciate following up with that discussion in case. Yeah.
Are there any other questions before I ask for a motion?
I got one thing. So, I'm sorry.
Trustee Williams, please.
Just real curious, if you're looking at 700,000 down, what's your total budget?
Approximately.
I should know exactly. It's right around just over 4 million. Yeah.
It's more than our whole town. Our
That's
town's
really significant then.
Yeah.
Your shortfall is really significant.
And it's not like that this year. And the good news is we captured a bunch of issues that we're turning around. It's not just the the contrast to a few other areas, we had some turnover in like our fundraising and development positions a couple of years in a row, and so the core fundraising efforts that we do took a big step backwards at a really bad time with the market going down. And so I think it was like a perfect storm of things that were bad. We had the reserves to cover it, and we've reoriented that trajectory. So there's not a fear that we're tanking into the hole, that we're having some of these tough conversations with folks like you as part of moving forward in the future, knowing that we want to be 5-10 years now still solvent and still serving the communities. That's what we're doing, and that's basically it.
Thank you. Sergeant Sears?
Oh, no, I briefly talked about this last week with Victoria, and I left a message with our animal control supervisor. She wasn't able to make it tonight, but I did talk to one of our animal control officers, and so I guess she's working on something. I'm not sure exactly what it is. If it's changing our contract with Long Humane, so I'm not sure. So I'll be with her and hopefully have that. Maybe I can leave the thing.
Okay. That's good to know. It sounds like everybody's tackling the issue head on. So then I would ask for a motion to table resolution 2023-82 until we get all the information we need.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Open vote. Maybe try to get one.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. Russell, thank you so much for coming tonight. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And thanks for doing what you do.
Yeah.
You're right, we all are animal lovers. Yeah. Okay, and then moving on, I pulled item 4, resolution 2023-83 regarding the orchard at 124 Fourth Avenue. Trustee Delman, would you like to recuse yourself?
Do I go to the podium?
Yeah, as the applicant.
Yeah.
Or the table, either one.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask for a staff report here, so as the record shows, trustee Delman recused himself. Okay, so planner Painter, good evening. Would you like to give us a staff report?
Good evening, Mayor Rogan, Mayor Pro Tem Farrell, members of the board. Yes, from our last presentation with Mr. Delman, the board did ask for a few requirements to move forward with this procedure. One was an operations plan, which he did submit to the town. He did also submit a certificate of liability for the insurance of the property, as well as working with one of the nonprofit local organizations to kind of provide a little backbone of support, which he has done as well. And that's with the Lions Community Farm Project. So Mr. Delman has met the requirements that the board asked. And there was one update that came up in the last week regarding where he would get his water source from. If I may share my screen, let me pull this up. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Under the operations plan for 2.3 water management, Mr. Delman will be setting up an account under the Lions Community Orchard and will draw water from the bulk water dispensary at the standard bulk water rate, which will then be stored in a water tank on a trailer. And the trailer will be maintained in roadworthy condition due to the fact of being on a deed restricted property or any of the others working alongside the community orchard and Lions Community Farm Project. He would be able to, him or the organization would be able to move the trailer in 30 minutes or less due to a possible flooding. And since then, Mr. Delman has been very supportive and stayed on track with keeping us informed throughout the process. And I will let him as well speak on his behalf.
Mr. Delman, would you like to address the board?
So, yeah, so the project right now, the plan is for 24 trees. And since there's no water source, it will be the trailer with some water tanks on it. And we will be partnering with the Lions Community Farm Project for the food forest. And right now I have about 35 people who are interested in participating. And I did go out and speak with some of the people in the neighborhood, and everybody was supportive except for one person who said he likes to see the bears and the lions wander through his property. He doesn't want things that are not natural. But other than that, everybody else was supportive. And I handed everybody out a letter from one of the residents, just kind of explaining how his family has been in Lyons since the 1800s, and he remembers his grandfather had apple and cherry trees, and he misses how they've been gone, and he's looking forward to having some fruit trees and with the elementary school being on board and wanting to have the kids come over, and then the high school ecology class wants to participate as well. And in this letter, he talks about how getting the kids out and about and not on screens is a wonderful thing. So, any questions?
Any questions for either planner painter or Mr. Delman?
Appreciate all your really hard work on this. You brought it up and we pointed out all the things. Just appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have a question about the trailer.
Yes.
So, is it okay to have, if the trailer's roadworthy, is that enough to have it stay on the property all the time, or would it be better to bring it in and out?
Yeah,
when it?
From my understanding under Dr. Bopp and in the lease, it says that there's can be no parked vehicles, like long-term. So I really do think that the trailer should not be parked on there all the time in between. Maybe we can help you find another site for it.
Yeah, if we could find another site, but Lions Community Farm Project has offered their site, even though it's not optimal there.
Yeah, it really shouldn't be parked in a floodway, because if we get a flood warning, we want you to focus on getting you and your family out. We don't want you to be spending time going into a floodway to remove a trailer. So I'd really rather you find somewhere it could be parked when you're not using it. That would be my preference, and I believe that Dr. Bob Lee says that no vehicles are to be parked.
Okay. Are you okay with updating the operations plan to reflect that? Yeah.
And no
Okay.
change in the water use too, since it's different in the.
Yes, yeah, and so, process question then before I ask for, any other questions or motion, so the resolution that's before us incorporates the operations plan, right? And so.
So I would, if I can may anticipate your question, I think
Yeah.
what we should, if you're inclined to vote for this, I think what you should do is, under the condition operations plan, be updated to include the following. We just list out what it is.
Okay. Any other questions? Please.
Yeah, can I just ask for clarification between the water and the fire hydrant and the trailer with the tank?
So fire hydrant has been taken out of.
Okay, got it.
And so all the water will be taken from here. Using, an account, just like anybody else.
Bulk water at that rate.
Okay,
They'll pay for it.
okay, thank you.
No tap needed, no hydrants.
Okay. So bulk water paid by the association okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
So I have one question, with more from my knowledge than anything else. So how does the food force get their water?
They have a tap.
They have a tap.
They have the tap. The town, the previous board of trustees agreed to loan them a tap.
Okay.
So if we ever need it for affordable housing or
back.
something, it would come back. Again, it's really during those establishment years that it's,
Right, so could we loan a tap to?
except there's not a physical one here.
That's what I was curious.
Yeah, there was one already at the,
That's what-
yeah.
that was-
There was a couple sites. If you recall on the buyout properties, there are those that are leased to neighbors because they're in between two houses. And then there's larger parcels that are made up of larger acreages or 3 or 4 parcels. And there, in that plan, a couple were identified for community needs, and those were a garden and an orchard and a botanic garden. So those we had taps on. And And the rest, we took them away and used them toward affordable housing.
So another question, and I'm just thinking outside the box, is there a tap locally around there that we could loan to this project so that water could be taken from there for the beginning years, because that's when it needs the most water as opposed to paying for it?
That's the only other one that was documented as being kept is Third and Evans for.
Third and
Park. That corner property was one of the others that was looked at. So again, when all the taps for the flood buyouts were given back, 3 of them, Victoria said properties, we kept the taps on them. Third and Evans, you could move and you'd have to find a physical tap. I'm not aware over there. We'd have to dig around and see if something.
All right, I was just curious, thinking kind of outside the box, because I know the water was the most important at the beginning, so it helped out for the beginning, so, okay.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, other questions? Okay, well then I will move to approve resolution 2023-83. A resolution of the town of Lyons, Colorado, amending the 2017 land use management plan for deed restricted buyout properties, Dr. Bob, to accommodate an orchard at 124 4th Avenue on the condition that the operations plan is updated to reflect that the Lyons Community Orchard will set up an account and pay the normal rate for water. And that the trailer shall be not stored on site. So I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote.
And that motion passes unanimously.
Congratulations, Glenn, you have an orchard. And thanks to staff for working through all that.
Yeah, it's not an easy process.
I know. Okay, so we have no boards and commissions this evening. So do we want to move on to general business or take a short break?
I think we'll have like,
Quick break. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. I agree. Okay, we'll get started and trustee Elson will join us when he's ready. So first item of general business is discussion direction to staff on the housing study. And the question is, should we host public hearings is the decision point. And prior to that, what other thoughts do we have? What other discussion do you want to have about the housing study? So trustee Edding, would you like to get this up? Because I know you had a.
Well, yeah, going back to, I think what we talked about during the workshop, if this is non-binding and it's something that we're not gonna even vote on or adopt officially, we can have a public hearing. But I don't even know what we would respond to if there's no motion on the table. We would just basically hear everybody's input, which is fine.
And perhaps revise the plan.
And revise it, yeah, so I suppose we could take the document, rewrite parts of it. But I don't know, what's the point of rewriting the document you're never gonna adopt? So I guess that's putting in my mind is like, there's some things I really agree with and things I don't agree with, but I don't know how seriously to take it. So I'll stop there because I'd love more thoughts about it. It's one, what's the process? What are we really doing?
I think it's a guiding document for us. Go ahead.
And if I can respond, I feel like we've already surveyed the community. I mean, we put it out there, sure and he said it was great, input. We had 75 people respond. But I do agree that this is a guiding document, and I think our main priority at this point, because we opted into Prop 123, is figuring out where we're going to build 10 units in the next 3 years. For me, that is our priority right now. And so I feel like some of these strategies we need to look at really closely, whether it's looking at vacant publicly owned property or incentivizing the creation of ADUs on previously developed residential parcels. I mean, I remember when Planner Kimmett was here and he was talking about all those big lots around, north of Maine or in the old historic part of Lyons. And I would love to go back and revisit the map of those large parcels and which ones could support an ADU, for example. I mean, I think we need to start thinking about, the HUD bio properties versus the FEMA bio properties. And I just think we need to start thinking about where could we possibly fit 10 units? And maybe we can start small. Right? Maybe we can start there. If we want to tap into that funding. And I think some of that funding is key when it comes to that local planning capacity grant. Because if we're going to coordinate, building of 10 affordable units, we're going to need some help. And that funding, covers some help with local planners. And we need that help. Go ahead.
I mean, just from my perspective, since it is a study, it's just a data point. Right, I mean, if you wanted to have a guiding document of some kind, that would be a housing plan or housing policy that the board would craft, maybe with help from a consultant. But a study isn't meant to be a plan or a policy. It's not something you adopt. It's just something you collect for information, maybe inform those documents. And so, at least from my perspective, why you might want to do public input, if you want to, it would be public input, not a public hearing. You're not taking testimony. It's just to make the data better, right? To get more responses if you think that would be helpful or not. But one, it's not a public hearing. You're not taking testimony or swearing witnesses or doing that sort of thing. And then, two, I think it is important to realize this is a study and not a plan or a policy.
The policies will come next.
Yeah.
And some of those will come through planning commission, some may come through your housing commission.
And the way I look at it is, when we decided to opt into the Prop 123 money, we also had to agree to adopt 3 policies. And so what the study shows us is what those policy options might be. And so it's up to us to determine which ones we want to pursue. And the study gives us some background information for that.
So I would like to spend my time talking about which policies we're going to adopt and not trying to massage the study.
Okay.
Because I think it's just going to be a waste of time massaging the study. It is what it is. It's a data point. Let's go with it. I can agree with some things, disagree with some other things, but let's talk about the policies as a different thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I do want the information on the HOAs because I think it's very significant. I think it's going to be real limits as to what we can do. This to me is enough information. Let's figure out what we can actually do, because that's what I want to communicate to the town. and really get responses from people as to actual one-page bullets, this we want to do, what do you think of this? I mean, that's really where I want to hear, you know, you're taking every C on a disc test is gonna pay attention to that, but not a DI or S, which means not 3/4 of the population are going to interact with something that detailed. And I think something much more simple is important for us to communicate to the whole town. But I think we've got to figure out what's doable out of this and move on that, because otherwise we're going to end up missing out on the you know, Prop 123 stuff. I hope we can hit those goals. But after the thing, I don't know how. I mean, after all of that, I still don't think I know how we could hit them.
Yes, so my only request really out of this is for historical context that I think a piece is missing that I'd really like to see if it's added as an amendment to the end. And I believe it was around 2014, 2015, when it was trying to be decided where to put the affordable housing complex that was gonna be up for vote. And it ultimately decided was Bone Park, but prior to that, there was some study by a consultant that evaluated like 9 pieces of land around town.
Trestle, it was 18.
18. For some reason, multiples of those had significant barriers.
Yep.
And it all funneled down to Bone Park. Then the town voted no. Anyway, I would just love that study in some way to be a part of this because some work and serious evaluation went into these lands. Now, granted, things can change. I don't disagree with that at all. But that's information that I only know a piece of it is out there. And people 10 years from now, this room will look different. And I want them to know that there's that for them to say, hey, why was this an issue before? And maybe it's no longer an issue now, but we should understand it. So if we could add that to this, maybe as an appendix or in the appendix, I would really appreciate it. And that's my only request.
And for those of you who don't know, immediately after the flood, we had a group come in and do what they called a housing needs assessment. And that was to try to get our arms around how many people were displaced, all that. Following that, there was a formation of a housing commission, temporary. And then as part of that process, we had a group named Trestle who came in and they actually set up an office on Main Street. They were here for a year and a half. And we identified every site we could think of. And it was either 16 or 18 lots. And they went and did a full study on each lot and brought down put down the constraints on each lot to come up with where should we place this. So yes, we are very constrained, but I agree. The appendix could certainly be helpful. I don't know which of those conditions may have changed over that time, but it's a snapshot of 2018 or whatever.
Did Bohannon Houston have that document when they started writing this?
I don't know.
They should have.
I don't know if they did or not. You know, this was an assessment of our current situation and what the current residents wants. I mean, Trestle may have even been 16. I mean, it was still pretty fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll make sure you guys all see that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The thing I do remember is that it did not lose by a lot.
No, it did not.
And so I think in a situation like that, a lot of it comes to messaging.
Yes. Well, and so we're not in a situation at the moment where we're talking about changing the zoning of parks and open space. I do think it would behoove us to host an additional public input session. I think it's great that 75 people responded online. I think and they did some good public outreach. I don't think it'll hurt. I think it could possibly help us get even as much input as we can before we put a cap on the study.
Well, we are through our grant dollars. So if you have them rewrite this significantly, because as you saw on their timeline, they have had community input since the very first month. We will probably have to pay that out of our own pocket. Just so you know.
If they rewrite it.
If we ask them to do significant work, because this has been being followed, closely by planning commission and others, and
Yeah.
just FYI, I know they're at the end of their contract.
I don't see significant work being necessary per se. I think that if anything, it's a matter of maybe adding some language that expresses the community's concerns. And that could be done with a cover letter.
But is the community a handful of people when this has been out there to the public?
Well, exactly. I think for politics reasons, I think it is important to have a community input session on a final product.
We
But
planned on having one on the 2nd and the 16th, and then adopting this on the 16th. DOLA has given us a 1-month extension to get this document to them. This was due at the end of this year.
And talk about legally what adoption means, because I think that.
Yeah, you just said
Accepting you're accepting the study's complete.
Oh, you're accepting is complete. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we
adopting is-
agree with anything.
You're just accepting their assessment,
It's-
their
okay.
study.
Like a notice of project completion.
Yeah.
Like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Trustee.
And I think it would be good for us to get a recommendation from the Housing and Human Services Commission and from the PCDC.
Does the Housing and Human Services Commission have the presentation from Bohannon?
Yeah, they were invited to the.
They were invited to the planning commission and the chair was there and I was there as liaison.
So if HHS has feedback, yes, I mean, absolutely.
Are you saying a separate public input, or is the 2nd and the 16th?
I think the 2nd and the 16th are fine.
why me too?
People are traveling.
The January 2nd, we've gotten feedback years past that when we do these things over the holidays, they feel that people aren't paying attention or they're not available.
So we'll give them all the.
Yeah, we're sneaking it through.
Yeah, so we'll give them just all the efforts. And it, and the way that would look, Administrator Simonson, is just, it would be an agenda item, public input on that housing study, isn't it? And, if people come, great, and if they don't, okay.
Well, and I got public input today from someone. I sent it immediately to Derek. So, we don't have to wait to those dates. We're accepting public input up through the end, so.
Yeah, I don't think we want to incur more costs from Bohannon and Houston, so,
just so you know, DOLA gave us through the end of January.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
I'd just like to add one thing, and I might have said this before, but I think it is important to say again, and the Housing Commission might bring this up when they come to testify at these public hearings, but in this past year, they have already hosted information sessions around affordable housing that we had available in the town with Lions Valley Townhomes. And of the 90 people or so who showed interest in affordable housing, a third of them was interested in 1-bedroom apartments. So I just want to remind everybody here that the Housing Commission was already able to identify informally that there were at least 30 people interested in 1-bedroom, and we were not able to offer that at all because Lions Valley Townhomes, it's only 2 or 3 bedroom. So already we have that data point.
Yeah, and yeah, that's been a point of discussion before, how the need for, the greatest need is for 1-bedroom. So then are we in agreement that the 2nd and the 16th are public input sessions?
And to suggest maybe some appendices with historic data.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that satisfies me.
And an HOA filter.
Yeah.
If you can.
It would be great to see a map. I mean, if that's even possible, to see a map of the town with the HOAs overlaid on it.
Okay. And actually, I do have a question about HOAs. Brandon, in the state, is it being considered that HOAs will almost become non entities,
So I mean,
so that if some reason a town like ours would want to make a change, that it could become more than a single family house.
so yes,
Okay.
but I wouldn't say HOAs are going away. It's like very selectively the state has decided that these sorts of things like xeriscaping is the prime example, right? Where the state decided to override all HOAs on the topic of xeriscaping. Where now every HOA has to permit some form of xeriscaping, and there's like a certain, no one's actually done it yet, but there's certain like approved plans basically for doing xeriscaping. I think you're gonna see a lot more of that going forward on housing, especially on ADUs. I think that's coming to our universe very soon, where they will override and you have to permit this in some form. What that looks like, I have no idea. The HOA's been powerful lobby too. But we are seeing in the state, which used to be one of the strongest HOA states in the country, that being eroding a little bit at a time. So-
And I think, you know, just what I've heard is that the state legislature is gonna take that up, and it's gonna be part of the governor's directive on a bunch of different land use bills related to affordableness.
Well, that's what I thought, is that at some point that overrides anything that we have.
It hasn't passed yet. It could take years. It could
Sure,
be.
yeah,
You never know, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like those other
Legislature does.
constraints. They're constraints, but they're not, it's not law yet. So,
Yeah.
okay.
And there's questions like, if it comes in, you know, Governor Pulse's land use bill, is that something that we fight because we don't like everything else in it? You know, and so is it a standalone package? Is it part of a big one?
We haven't seen.
Is it introduced as one thing, gets chipped away at? I mean, it's just hard to say,
Okay.
Yeah,
but I think
Because
you're
then there's
just-
gonna be appeals. It could be,
there
it
could be, I mean,
could be years.
I think
it
there,
could be years, yeah.
yeah, I think your inclination is right that the authority overall is getting chipped away, but it's like, how much is what no one really knows at this point.
How much
Okay.
it has to.
Okay, thank you.
That's one other question. There was one very interesting thing in this study. They referenced the city of Minneapolis. And they were saying that they had made all these laws that you could do duplexes. Then they found out nobody did it, right? Like,
And the tiny homes.
kind of like the tiny homes. And so we've been bitten by this a lot in the past. We regulated tiny homes, but nobody did them. We regulated ADUs, but a very small percentage of people did them. Is it possible to go in and say, okay, you have to do it? And the example is, there's a lot in here about, okay, you know, there should be no minimum lot size. Okay, can we have a maximum lot size? Like, can we make a regulation, you cannot build over 1,000 square foot home? Period.
So the question is complicated, as a lot of these are, because it really gets to, are you impinging on anyone's existing rights?
Yeah.
Taking away, is the government taking away their rights they currently have to do something? And if the answer is yes, then the only way you can make that happen is if you pay them money to compensate them for what you have taken away. If it's brand new land, let's say it's the eastern corridor, right, where, you know, it's one big lot and we're gonna subdivide it and stuff, you can certainly there where no one, you know, currently owns that property, make those regulations. But for the existing lots in town, it's gonna be, you can give them more rights in a lot of ways, like take away, you know, minimum lot size, for example, but taking away rights, you know, requires compensation in most cases.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm getting to is, I know developers are in it for the money. They want to make the highest profit. And single family homes of about 3,000 square feet are the highest profit margin. So how do you dissuade them from saying, okay, develop a lower profit margin if they have a use by right to do a higher profit margin? I guess that's what I'm
It's
wrestling
these
with.
incentives.
Incentivizing
It's
them.
these policies, doing a density bonus and offering
Yeah.
incentives. Or we can adopt policies that say for every single family, you have to have one affordable, you know, it's us setting those guidelines.
Yeah,
That's how you
I
do it.
think it's still a hard
No,
nut
it's very
to crack.
It's hard, it
because
is.
Yeah,
I
any
know
sort of
people are gonna
market,
do exactly what they did in Minneapolis. They're just not gonna do it.
Yeah.
any sort of market failure, I mean, your options are either, you know, carrots or sticks, right? So you gotta put your hand on the scale on one side or, you know, lift it up on the other. And, you know, the question is, to what extent is that legal
Yeah.
in our system, or, you know, the United States, you know, if we take away someone's property rights, we have to compensate them.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on this topic?
No, except that it's important. I mean, take it very seriously. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to discussion direction of staff regarding the Apple Valley property. Do we want to do a staff report?
Sure.
Weird. So, yeah, you may remember it's for about a year now or so, we've gone over the idea of selling the property that the town owns on Apple Valley where the previous water treatment plant was from the time when the town treated its own water. In looking at that parcel, we went through a number of different concerns, selling a parcel across the street. Was the parcel viable for building? Would Boulder County allow us to build? Most of the items have been worked out and we were in pretty good shape to be able to sell the property. The last item we were looking at was the actual property boundaries. I could pull up the map I sent her if you all saw it. Again, do we want to pull up the survey itself?
Yeah, let's do that.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell, I know, wanted to look at the survey. You want me to share my screen? Oh, yeah, I can do that since I just sent it.
You haven't logged in.
Oh, I'm not online there.
Do you want me to do it?
If you have it and you're on the meeting.
It seems convenient.
Okay.
And so the discussion at the end was that the property borders do go north of the St. Vrain Creek. Right, so we're talking about a property on the south side of the creek while we get that up. But just as a reminder, when it pops up, you will see the border does cross the creek and borders a portion of the north bank of the St. Vrain Creek.
And share screen in there. I'm finally there.
So staff was asked to look at what it would take to actually, was it possible and what would it take to subdivide that parcel to try to, I'd say, cut off to separate that northern border so that the town could keep the north border. Oh, I was using the survey.
Oh,
That's fine though. I mean.
This one's in the packet.
That works.
Right, so the survey shows it even more like up here.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but the town wanted to see then if we could separate, divide the property so that the section of property that's north of the creek would remain with the town. Planner Kimmett did contact the county and they did come back saying that was possible. And the second, not the second item, but X12A in your packet. Again, I haven't looked at it as a full packet, but there is the Apple Valley BOCO subdivision application in your packet. It is about a 60-page packet that goes through the process that would be required. You know, in addition to the application, we would need to go through the title information, subdivision exemption form, building lot termination letters actually were already included. It was highlighted in there, the costs, not terribly outstanding. I think it was $500 to start and then $106 per hour of their time. We don't really know what their time is going to be to review this. And then I'm just gonna go through some of the other, a development report would need to be done, an engineering report, the Board of County Commissioners grants exemption. It is highlighted, if we're trying to look at it right now. The proposed lots shall have legal access. There's a number of items in here that needed to be met. Staff's recommendation was that the level was that the level of requirements involved with the subdivision process didn't provide the benefit, I would say, to actually go through with trying to subdivide the property. The actual survey document showed the split here at right under the bridge. This section on both sides of the road is actually already part of Boulder County's easement along with all of this section over here. So there is right under the bridge, there is, you have to measure it, 10 feet, 20 feet that are currently part of the right of way and not part of our property. And then it only becomes further down. I know previously there was the comment how this is an area where there's a boat launch. And if somebody fell right over here, they could still get out. Again, as you continue down the creek, you're always gonna have places where you could fall and have to get out on somebody's property. This one section of creek is not very big when you compare it from here all the way down to say Black Bear Hole, or where somebody's gonna get out of the creek. Right, in comparison, you have all that private property where somebody still could tip over, need to get out. What is the difference between this section and that section? You still have the area here when you're first getting in, if something happens because you're not adjusted, where you could get out of the creek.
So Aaron, the piece of the triangle west of the bridge, that entire piece of property has a Boulder County easement on it.
Yes, and they maintain it for us.
And so if that were to be sold,
We won't sell that part.
Well, I think it would be, so the easement has to follow through with that sale.
Also,
It
so.
would just become theirs.
So if you're saying we won't sell that piece of
I'm
property,
just saying it won't change use.
Yeah.
They have a perpetual use on it now.
okay, so whoever buys that property, if we were to not subdivide any of it up, whoever buys this whole piece of property, the red and the yellow combined, even though they legally would own that triangle, they would have to let,
it runs with the land.
it runs with the
Yeah.
land, so it would have to always be.
It's a long
Perpetual
easement, like a
Okay.
utility easement. It's just
Okay.
a recreational easement.
Can I ask one
Yeah.
question? So could we just put an easement on the piece that we want?
You could put an access
Wouldn't
easement.
that be easier than subdividing if we just had an easement there that run with the land?
I don't know what their process would be for that.
Yeah,
Right, we'd have to go through the county since it's Boulder County for easement.
or another option, could you add?
Well, it's our property, so we wouldn't have to go through Frederick County.
No, they're just saying that would that be easier than doing this process to do this, to subdivide it.
Potentially, we could do as a condition of sale that we maintain. Sorry, I'll let you fix that. Go ahead.
Is that good? Or could we add that piece of land to the land county easement that already exists?
Well, we would be
Just turn your
granting,
sound off
yeah,
here.
if you turn your sound off.
He's
If
trying.
you- If we were to grant Boulder County another easement, we could do that now. No problem. If we wanted to keep it. I do.
Doesn't matter who keeps it if it's still.
I
Yeah,
could
if we-
use some help with something.
Yeah.
Explain to me how easements work.
So easements are a different type of property, right? We don't own the property. So I'll go back to law schools real briefly. So in law school, they explain this as a bundle of sticks, right? The property is a bundle of sticks. And there's different types of ownership in that bundle of sticks. One is what we call fee simple ownership of the land. That is like you own the dirt, right? But you can split up that ownership in many different ways. And one of those is called an easement, where it's basically I'm granting you a perpetual or temporary, you can do both, right to use this property in some very specific way. You can't do blanket easement usually. Usually it's for a specific purpose. So in this case, it would be an access easement where Boulder County is allowed to recreate or use or access this property in a certain way forever. And the only way to get rid of that is what we call an extinguishment, where you basically usually pay money to get rid of that easement. But absent that though, it stays forever.
How much money does that get determined?
It could be anything that constitutes a valid contract. So, $10 potentially and other good and valuable consideration. It doesn't, if it was with us, it could be whatever we set it as, right? If it's with the new owner, then it could be infinite amounts of money, right? But I think if we were the one to grant that easement, it would be, fairly minimal. We'd probably, do it for them.
Can you go close?
So another way, more common example of this is like for utility easement, for example, where, we own the space to put in our utilities. We don't own the rest of the dirt or the property, and that stays there forever, so long as we don't extinguish it or release it.
Right, I was thinking like a shared driveway. So we're,
It's an
we
access
live,
easement.
someone had property behind us, but they had an easement for our driveway to get to their property. So they could drive through, but couldn't do anything to the land.
The land is in there.
Correct. The land's not there, so. And one of there's different, like, basically you're supposed to share, right? So you can't do things that impacts the other people's property interests, so. They couldn't, put up a fence which blocked Boulder County from accessing. But by the same token, Boulder County couldn't dig a ditch into their property from their easement, right? So that's what keeps it the peace, if you will.
I was just thinking, I don't know if that would be easier than subdividing. And still get us what we want.
That's a great idea, actually.
Mhm.
It's a very good idea.
This is this is.
As long as it does preserve the accessibility issue, because I think that's really, really important. I mean, there are people that will come here to train at high water from Shelley's cottages and take out here. And that these are Olympian athletes. And so I'm talking about the Jacksons, for example. I mean, they're incredible. And this is a recreation destination. And I just would hate for some property owner that we sold to would have some ability to interfere with any access into this area.
So they put in the boat ramp, that's what you're saying? Yeah, so that would never change. If we did nothing else with the land that just sold it the way it is, they will always have access. Because Boulder County has.
That north side is where they're parking.
No,
No.
I'm talking
The
about
triangle
where the boat ramp is.
Oh, yeah, no,
Never
that
change.
never changes.
But we know that there are people who like to access the river to go fishing along that stretch.
So even.
So, I mean, I'm just saying that I think that it sounds like an easement would do just
I'm
fine.
not, I'm not sure, just a suggestion. And if we could give it to Boulder County, that would get rid of the liability for the town. Yeah. So that's
It works for me.
up to my head.
How long would that process take?
I don't know.
We don't even know.
We don't know. Can you
So,
just give
okay,
us?
so we can go back and now figure out.
So it's like either a kind of contract, we can't force it on them,
No,
right?
I know.
Yeah, I mean, so
Yeah.
they gotta agree to
They
it.
would,
Find
yes.
out what their process is to put an easement on it.
Well, it's our process.
Our process is Brandon drafts it up usually.
So that when we have that public hearing and stuff, right?
Well, in this case, we're alienating public property, so we'd have to have a board approval of it, yeah.
I'm still really kind of confused about what's the benefit to us of giving Boulder County an easement or subdividing versus just selling that other side of the like. Can people fish from elsewhere? I don't understand what the benefit is to going through that whole process.
Well, if you have fishing all the way down the stream that's private property and we have this one area that's not for people to go in and fish in, that's a really nice. That's a nice, they can go upstream. It's a really nice
I
stretch.
mean, how busy is it? Are people accustomed to doing that now?
I see people fishing.
I think the good thing about the easement is a landowner could eventually own that and then become really stickly about nobody on the property.
Sure.
Signs up all over the place.
Sure, yeah,
Um,
and that would be their right.
And that would be their right if we didn't do anything, and that's what I don't wanna see. So would love the idea of the easement, so it's not as cumbersome as the process, and there's already an easement on the triangle anyway. So all we're really doing is making a larger easement, right?
And it's
Be a
really.
different easement.
It'd be a different easement.
I mean, I can ask, but I don't see Boulder County taking that even when they have the whole other property that they maintain and already take care of, but.
Yeah.
And then River would probably be our easement,
Fine.
which maybe we want anyway, right?
Okay, so it sounds, Glenn, trustee Gilman, what do you think? You haven't piped up here.
That's a good idea.
I think an easement, well, originally I thought just having a small section where they could have their own access and no one else would. But now hearing the easement all along that, I think that's a better idea.
Trustee Williams?
So if Boulder County didn't want an easement, we could do our own easement on that, what the same?
We could do it now, before, right, Brandon?
Well, we can't do it now because if you have unity of ownership, you can't give something to yourself, right? And so you would do it as a condition of sale that the buyer agrees to basically dedicate to us a recreational easement or 5 feet on either side of the river or whatever it may be. That would be the second way to do it potentially.
Would that be likely easier than dealing with Boulder County on it?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
Dealing with ourselves?
Yeah,
Yeah.
to me, that seems to make the most sense, is to sell it with the contingency and easement on the north side.
Right.
I think that the downside of that, I don't know if it's down, just theoretically, one would be, sure, I lost my train of thought for a second. It's good, either way, it's gonna reduce the purchase price of the property probably.
And that was my question, by how much would it
Yeah.
reduce the purchase price? And
Yeah,
let's remember the proceeds from the sale are going into the water fund, which is necessary.
I remember my train of thought. So one, reduce the, either way, you're gonna reduce you may reduce it more if we did it as a condition of sale, there's been flashing red letters, that you're restricting the use of this property by a certain amount. But secondly, more importantly, I think is that if it's our easement, then we're the ones responsible for making sure it's maintained for public access forever, which means you're putting, and the potential liability. So we'd be the ones potentially fighting with the landowner over making sure the access to that easement was maintained.
Right
versus
now,
Boulder
if they're
County.
doing it, there's an accident, they're trespassing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My personal opinion is, I appreciate that people like to fish there. And I also feel like it seems cleaner and easier and more beneficial in the long run to the town to sell the property as is without subdividing, without easements. And let the property owner decide what happens in that little strip of land, which was, if we remember, I think a surprise to all of us. That it was even a part of that
That was even
property.
worse when that oil spill happened.
Yeah. But I'm one person.
But we could ask Boulder County if they wanna, if they want an easement on it. And then they take the liability and the maintenance along with the other part. And then it's still open to the public. We can't make them take it, but they may want it.
I mean, if it is going to, if we have liability issues and it lowers the value of it and we have to maintain it, then that doesn't seem like such a good idea to me, and I'm probably more inclined to agree with you. But I would like to see if Boulder County would want to take that at least, since they
Yeah.
already are doing it on the other side of the bridge.
Let's see, and they're doing a beautiful job.
And they have the same goal. They want to retain recreational and fishing access.
So it sounds like the direction of the board is for staff to
I'm
inquire.
not sure I've heard what you guys want.
Hmm.
Inquire about the easement.
I think I'm inclined with trustee Williams. I'd like the simplest solution for the greatest satisfaction of all. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm hearing the simplest solution would just be to sell the property as is, but then we're denying access to anybody who wants to recreate on that side. The second simplest is to go to Boulder County and ask for an easement. I guess, well, we could ask for an easement, but then we don't want to be liable.
Ask them if they want.
Ask them to take on that easement. I mean, I don't know. I could go either way, but I would definitely want to know what Boulder County thinks about taking that on that easement before deciding.
We're in IGA negotiations.
Right? Let's add it to the list.
And I'm saying, to be honest, I could go either way. I could see people fishing there regardless if
Yeah.
or not. I'd like to see a way where it could stay open space, but keep the town not liable.
Right.
So to me, if Baldwin County would take it, it'd be ideal, but I could be also convinced just to sell it as is.
Yeah.
So.
So it sounds like let's read, Brandon.
Another thought I just had too, as part of, and it's more of a technical thought than anything else, but if there's an existing easement on the triangle, upriver, you could just amend the easement to expand this, to include the new areas, if it was something amenable to Boulder County, so.
Is liability on this property any different than anywhere else?
No, other than if you're telling me it's, people doing what they consider high-risk activities, maybe, I don't know.
But getting, into the river from Bow Park or Black Bear Hole or anywhere else that has.
There's no
access.
formal access there. I mean,
There's formal access to get into the water from Meadow Park.
that's what I mean. There, it's formalized. It's meant to be. Here, they're trespassing and doing it on their own.
But what's the difference in liability between those two, if it's our property?
If it's intended to be an entry point, it's like, and we're basically telling them if you use this, you are assuming the risk of using it. So theoretically, you could make this so that it's like that. But right now, it's not, specifically intended to be an access point, so therefore.
It's stressful.
Yeah, you're using against how we have.
How it's intended.
How it's intended to be used at this point in time. That could change, but.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like the direction is to find out about either amending the easement or giving, and,
Or us putting on one after it's sold.
yeah,
Sorry, I made more work.
Okay.
I can't believe I haven't thought of that sooner, though, to be honest. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That was a good suggestion.
Thank you, Lindsay, also.
Just popped in my head here.
What's the easement at all? I mean, is a novel solution.
Yeah, okay, pats on the back for trustee Elton.
Things happen.
Give another cookie. Okay, let's move on then to discussion direction on stormwater projects, please. So we had a workshop earlier and talked about some options for stormwater projects following trustee Edding's very good question about cost benefit analysis. And so we got some options, had a discussion. And so now I think we need to decide how we would like to direct staff to move forward. Anybody want to kick us off?
Well, it seems to me that we still need UEB to be a part of this decision. I'd love to hear what their recommendation is. Is there another? Do we need to hear from anybody else?
No, that's in the workshop. We were saying that would be the one direction at least was to bring this to the next UEB meeting.
But if in your memo, you said when they adopted the icon, they noted that.
They didn't, again, as I said, they didn't state specifically we should do the curb and gutter on second and third and not the stormwater. I mean, not the piping underground, the larger portions. So that's gonna be the question. Are they comfortable moving forward with the smaller option that icon offers versus the full option?
So recommendation.
Well, we have, we have a ballot issue coming up, right? That's gonna affect this.
Your next meeting.
So we've got this ballot issue. It's gonna either pass or not pass. Whether it does or does not could greatly affect what we decide to do, right? So I don't even know what we're gonna really discuss until that ballot issue goes to vote.
Well, if the ballot issue doesn't pass, this could be funded by raising the stormwater rate.
But I don't wanna have that discussion until the ballot, it's a
We,
discussion.
and if we go for a loan.
Right, it could go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think why you might want to consider this now, because as Cass and I talked about earlier, the bond money, the loans from the revolving loan fund from the Water and Power Board, those are first come, first serve, and they're gonna run out unless you get in line quick. And so that's why you may want to, if you're interested in doing that at all, you should decide now to do it, because I know that there already things gonna run out in the first quarter.
Go ahead.
Does anything that we decide here affect how we do the language on the ballot for the taxes? Should we take that into consideration too?
So it only affects it to the extent of what the language says and how broad it is. And we would always, to the extent we make it as broad as we can, we would encourage you to do that. And the reason why it affects that is that it all depends on the enterprise status, it gets complicated to Tabor. If that money gets injected into the stormwater fund through a general sales tax increase, then they could also lose enterprise status that way, then you may not be eligible for these bonds or loans. And so it is interconnected. But it's hard unless we create a plan now, say, yes, we want to do a loan and we want to do sales tax or one or the other. It will have impacts on how we write that ballot question. So we're gonna make it broader, not narrow, we're not gonna mention storm sewer if you say we're also a loan. Because as soon as we inject that money into the sewer enterprises, we don't lose enterprise status.
So, but we could put that money in the streets capital fund, which is not an enterprise fund. So we could put the sales tax money in a capital fund and use the money from that capital fund to pay for
Parts of things.
parts of things.
Yeah, it gets complicated because like you take the asset and move that into this sewer fund, that could also be a problem potentially.
Director Eisner, would you like to clear this up for us?
I think if you wanted to go with a general, language, you could put it into the capital fund. And again, it's not necessarily, well, we verbalized, we've designated for streets. It is technically just a capital fund. So at that point, we could use it for any purpose, that we needed to, as long as it met the language from the ballot language.
I'm just really concerned that if we're not a little bit more specific, it might not pass. If we don't specify which capital fund.
I mean, generally, when you do a ballot question, you say this is what the purposes are. You don't say what fund it goes into.
Okay.
I think your last meeting, you talked about doing an education campaign of these would be our recommendation of projects.
And we also talked, I think that's a really good question. And we also talked about, okay, so if this ballot measure does not have a sunset and we do all the streets in town, then what does the money go for? Right? Because eventually.
Right, then we'll have to redo the ones we just.
It might be a pipe dream that we get all the streets done, but it provides for some flexibility, because who knows, there might be another natural disaster that requires different capital improvements than streets.
Let's take, so if the ballot would not go through, you have your loan funds, which I think, Cassie, you said the payoff on that was really short. Well, I mean, they have a 20-year loan.
20 years, yeah. And so if we were to go with the smaller project, and the ballot language did not pass, we would need approximately $5 to $6 increase monthly in the stormwater fee.
Which
And
is not,
the Water and Power Authority is going to need the pledge specified and or approved, whether it be by resolution for the fee or ballot language passing, before they will approve the loan.
when's the deadline to apply for that one?
We could start the meetings at any time. So when we say 2024 funding is going to run out, they get funding annually. And they have funding through, they do like a revolving loan program, similar to what we do, of course, on a much larger scale, but then they also get federal pass-through dollars, which helps, the loan program as well. And then for projects that are over $3 million, they go out to the bond market, which we wouldn't need to do in this case unless we were choosing to go with the much larger scale project. So we can start those meetings at any time and get in line for any cycle. They anticipate that the 2024 wastewater, stormwater money is going to go quickly. But that doesn't mean then that we're not in line for first thing in 2025. But definitely our first steps is to meet with them and the state, to to figure out, you know, what our project is, if it's fundable, which I would think it is. But yeah, I think that would be our first step.
I'd rather act sooner rather than later. Given that money's likely to run out again.
Trustee Dunn?
I have to say, I don't know. I prefer.
Okay. Do you have specific questions or?
No,
Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm not sure either.
Really not, so keep going.
I'm gonna have to join the band here and I'm not sure either. There's just not enough to make a decision on here. I'm really curious if the ballot's gonna pass or not and not really acting until then. If we do have a time constraint and we need something, can we, is this as stupid as it sounds, can we discuss raising the stormwater monthly fee? And then if the ballot passes, then move that fee back.
I think you have to assume the ballot will not pass
Yeah,
for
yeah,
your
I think so.
assumptions.
Yeah,
It's kind of like when we apply for grants. We don't put those in as revenue. Those are great if they happen. But I think you have to enter this with total understanding that it may not. So are you, basically the question is, are you interested in moving forward with a loan for second and or third to get those going in late 24, 25? Maybe it's more just your UEB recommendation. If they say yes, we move forward. If they don't, I mean, it's your decision, but we can't count on the ballot.
no, yeah. Brandon?
You had asked me at the last meeting for research on how many Tabor ballot measures pass. And
Yeah.
I did find that it's 43% was the last one I saw, 43% pass. I couldn't find it again, unfortunately, once I saw it. And I think it was like a different post or something like that, but yeah, 43% was the number of what does pass.
Okay,
Tabor sales.
okay.
Okay, so the question you're asking us is move forward, you know, is the preamble in here is assume it's not gonna pass. Do we want to move forward by increasing the stormwater fee
Or applying for the loan,
or applying? for-
because that's the process we gotta get going.
To get some work done.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, then I think the answer is,
The lower.
Yes.
the answer is yes then, yeah.
Well, I think the answer is yes, if the UEB agrees. I want to hear what
Well,
the
yeah.
UEB says first.
But again, I would think if we're going for the loan, we need the funding to back it up. So
You
that
do.
means you are gonna do,
You
with no passage of the other, you're gonna raise the
Yeah.
rate.
We're gonna
If the
raise the
sales
fee.
tax, that we're gonna raise it by
Mhm.
$5 or $6.
I pay that $60,000.
Yeah.
But if it does
Hang on.
pass. we
Then you're
reduce the
great.
fee.
Yeah, then we can use it for the streets or whatever. we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, for Tabor ballot initiatives, we have to, the community creates a pro and con statement. And so part of the pro/con statement could be the information that if this does not pass.
Get $5 increase.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
So, okay, so,
but that gives you a path forward on those two streets that have appeared to be,
Yeah.
you know, high visibility and importance, so.
well, and they are crumbling. I mean,
The roads are eroding.
yeah,
They can confirm.
yeah.
Yeah, this is a path forward.
Okay, great. Okay.
So.
Yep.
Our direction to staff is get a recommendation from UEB
Mhm.
and move forward with discussions with the state on potential application.
Mhm.
And then we'll get more firm numbers on the street portion
Mhm.
in the meantime as well,
Okay.
so that we have a full cost for both of these
Yeah, let's
projects.
see what we're.
Current
talking
cost.
about. Okay, great.
So
Thank you very
correct?
much. Yep. Thank you.
Cassie,
Thank you. Cassie, did you
Cassie?
have something?
I just have one last question, and clarification. What is our deadline for the ballot question, Dolores?
Yeah.
Do we need to decide on our language?
I have to order ballots the first week of February, and I believe Brandon said we could go ahead and do it by resolution, so we could have a public hearing on a resolution if you want public input, but
We're gonna,
Yeah.
we were already planning on the second,
Yeah.
having on the agenda.
Okay.
If it was gonna.
Okay, feel better, Cassie.
Yeah, tell the log
Thank
off.
you. I know I look horrible. I
No,
gotta
you
look at
don't.
myself on video when I look awful.
Feel better. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so trustee reports, trustee Ellison.
The SFC met with me last Thursday. And they're actually going over the LESAP goals, the Lions Environmental Sustainability Action Plan from 2019. To see what's been completed, what is still to be completed, to make sure we still want them to work on it, and to see if some things need to be changed. So we reviewed one of them on buildings, and out of the 5 goals, they've completed 3.
Great.
Then 2 of them, they need to rewrite because they don't feel like they're still applicable. But they're gonna go through all that, bring it to us and make sure that we still want them to work on it.
Terrific.
Will they reference the comprehensive plan in that?
Yes.
Oh,
Take a note of that just in case. And the EAB is meeting tomorrow night. So no updates for the EAB.
okay, great. So the EAB is meeting tomorrow night and, on our January 2nd meeting, we're gonna talk about the CMEX issue, which was, during our last meeting, and trustee Williams suggested that we punt it until you show up to
I know.
get your input.
I watched the whole meeting, believe it or not.
I'm sure you know.
YouTube later on, and I completely agree with what you said, trustee Eddie, for CMEX. You brought up with CMEX how so ideally, I would love them to close, but I don't feel like we can say that they should close. Really, what we want them to do is conform to what they need to conform to keep operating. So that's my opinion.
Okay, well, I don't know, do we still need to keep that on the agenda for?
I'd have to.
We'll chit chat about that later, thank you. Okay,
When are the public comments due?
it's in-person testimony on January 5th,
Okay.
which I'm already signed up for.
So I say if we are being, so let's just have an agenda, just give authorization to do it.
Yeah, well, we did that on the last agenda, and that's what got punted.
But it was punted for his input.
Yeah.
It wasn't advertised as tonight, it's on the second.
Yeah, so we'll keep it on there, we'll keep it brief, thank you though. Okay. So the EAB, so, Mr. Lowell emailed me, about the weed management plan, asking if we still wanted their input, and yes, we do.
Yeah, then we're gonna review it tomorrow night.
Okay.
They had pre-work to read it and come up with ideas for tomorrow's meeting.
Okay, and if they don't come to a consensus or agreement, I still want to know what they think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we all do. Okay, thank you. Trustee Dati.
Oh, it's going to be so short. The EBC did not meet, the Housing and Human Services Commission did not meet. I simply attended the PCDC workshop last week as liaison to the Housing and Human Services Commission because the Housing Futures Plan was being presented. And I thoroughly enjoyed the volunteer appreciation party. Thank you so much for organizing. And that's all.
Thank you. Trustee Edding.
The UAB met December 6th. There's a couple things that they're discussing that are gonna be in our workshops, but they keep getting put off, from what I understand.
You're on January 2nd.
We're on January 2nd.
Yeah,
So-
it was because Chairman Kerr was out of control.
Gone for a long time, yeah. So, but there are 3 interesting things. Aaron was talking about the water share and the McIntosh shares, so we'll have some more water shares discussion. The gentleman from TR Resource, that has difficulties getting things in a very concise way, where you're working on the time of use statement from him, like.
Haven't heard anything from him.
Okay.
The last feedback.
And then what was also interesting is, hopefully we'll be going all green at some point. The question was, is mean, what do we call it, greenwashing? Is it really green?
Yeah.
How valid is it? And of course, there's probably degrees of how valid it is, but he made an assessment on that, at least verbally to you.
Right.
That
That they were doing a good job and they were legitimate.
that they were legit, that this was really legit green
Documenting all
policy.
the recs that we talked about, yeah.
All right, and are you gonna try to get that in writing or try to get Whatever you can.
Try again, yeah, again, the last two emails, he said, this is my final, and I tried twice and not gotten anything more, so.
Let him try.
All right, so anyway, those are the three things still.
Right, thank you.
There'll be stuff on the workshop.
Any questions for trustee Eddie? Mayor Pro Tem?
Okay, so, the PCDC last week met and basically went over the housing, assessment and that we just heard this evening. There was quite a bit of feedback, from audience business, but I think we are moving in the right direction. I don't, anything else, question? Trustee Delman?
So Parks and Rec did not have a December meeting. They'll be meeting again in January.
Okay,
Historic preservation meets Wednesday.
great. Okay, so that's me. Thank you for the party. The board, it was really fun, the boards and commissions party. Well, we didn't do the work putting it together. We know staff did. Also, the lights look fantastic. I've had several requests. Can we at least keep the globes on all year long?
Some of the globes we own, some are rented. So there's probably enough if you want to keep them like on Main or
Yeah.
Sandstone, but not enough to do Main.
I mean, it would be great to get, they're so beautiful. It'd be great to keep them made. So I attended the Congressional Service Awards this week, which was really fantastic. One of our own, Nancy Reckling, got a Congressional Service Award as Volunteer of the Year for Leaf. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to attend because she was closing a house. So Lori accepted for her, but it was really a lovely event and it was so great to be part of something that was 100% positive and learn about the amazing things some of our young people are doing and the amazing things happening all over the state, all over the district. So that was really great. And then I just want to remind people that we can pick up petitions to run for the board on January 2nd. And they're due on January 22nd, correct? So I just want to make the public and the board aware of that.
Yeah, I don't have my calendar up.
I believe that's what she told me last time.
Yes.
I think that's how many, right?
Yeah.
I have it.
Has
So-
CML sent you the 2024 book yet? or-
I just got a packet of them for the trustee if you're considering running for office, but they were behind in printing the election book.
No, they said it was supposed to be out like any moment.
Yeah, they said.
So, and that's it for me. Okay. Summary of action items, please.
Okay, I've got item 1, draft a list of potential housing sites with current restrictions and obstacles. This is from the workshop. A list of HOAs and zoning and rules and regs. What percentage of housing stock is governed by HOAs? The next item, they would like to see a stormwater recommendation on the next UEB agenda. I think they meet next Wednesday, you said?
I thought it was this Wednesday,
Or
but they
this-
may not be having one on the second one in December.
Okay.
I'll
Well, for their next meeting.
We'll have to have it before January
see
2nd.
what I can do.
Yeah.
Next, I have resolution 2023-82, the Humane Society agreement was tabled until updated numbers and data are given to staff. Resolution 2023-83, the orchard passed with amendments. The trestle study is to be added as an appendix to the housing study for historical data. Number 7, schedule an additional public input session for housing. These are scheduled for January 2nd and January 16th. The mayor would like to see a town map with HOA overlays. Staff is to research the BOCO process to grant additional easement on Apple Valley property. And then a potential to include condition of sale to include a town easement on the Apple Valley property if sold. And then the board consensus is to get the UEB recommendation and move forward with the state loan application and increase stormwater fee by $5 to $6 to repay the loan. Anything?
The last one, I don't think is that specific. I think it's determine the current cost of the project, so we can figure out what that increase would be.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll just put
Old
potential
numbers.
increase.
And then keep the spears in the trees year round.
Yeah.
And everybody in the picks up ballot petition or,
On the second.
yeah,
Petition packet.
petition packet.
We'll have them, maybe we can have them ready for. We can just sign.
It's a Christmas present.
And I need to talk to both Aaron and Jim Kerr on time of use rates and working on that, so.
Oh, and one more thing, we are gonna look at could we and what would it cost underground electricity on either second or third if there's any lines on those? Well, if they're on the avenue, in the alleys, that would be. Okay.
Electric on second and third.
I wanted to know if I could ask a question on the trustee reports, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
so for the LSAP, for the SFC, I thought that part of the comp plan was taking those reports, allowing them to go through one by one, and so the SFC would have already done that when it went into the comp plan. Just, I thought that part of Trestle, whoever did that, their specific item was these were being wrapped in and they were being closed. So that anything that's not done from that report should be part of the new comp plan.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So you might
Clarity.
check that, but I thought that was already done and not redoing it again.
Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to go into executive session?
I move to go into executive session being conducted pursuant to CRS sections 24-6, 4024E and 24-6, 4024B for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators, and for receiving legal advice from attorneys representing the town on specific legal questions and specifically determining the negotiating positions and strategies regarding the intergovernmental agreement between the town of Lyons and Boulder County and obtaining advice as needed from legal counsel on related issues.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
And that motion passes unanimously. Give me 1 second while I switch recordings.